we're missing Judy and Margie. We do have a quorum.
Okay.
Good evening. Hi. We don't have a quorum just yet. We need, oh yes, we do.
We do, yes.
Just 5 members, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Hi, and welcome to this special meeting of the Social and Economic Justice Commission for the City of Albany. We appreciate your attendance. Before we move on to our very full agenda, we should take a moment to acknowledge the land on which we are gathered. For thousands of years, this area has been Huichin and surrounding areas, including ancestral and unceded land of the Chochenyo Ohlone and Bay Miwok people, recognized in the Verona Band of Alameda County, whose descendants now include members of the Muwekma Ohlone tribe. This land was and continues to be of great importance to the Ohlone people, and they have remained committed to the stewardship of this land over many centuries. We are honored and grateful to be here today on their traditional lands. I am here to welcome you on behalf of the City of Albany Social and Economic Justice Commission, an advisory body appointed by the City Council to make recommendations on issues of justice so that the council can act. We're here because of the enormous public response generated in the aftermath of the killing of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and others, and in response to other historic injustices and incidents of anti-Black racism, and on the charge of City Council to investigate those issues here in Albany. Here in Albany, the public has weighed in vast numbers of emails and comments, which are recorded in the supporting documents for this and prior meetings of our commission and of the City Council. And some of you here have already been to many meetings and have made your voices heard again and again, yet still we are here. I know it can be discouraging to contemplate how slowly the wheels of governance turn, but I do want to assure you that we do hear you, and we have a sense of the things that people are conveying to us through these comments and emails. Altogether, the letters and comments asked us to use this moment to reflect upon Albany's history, our own history, and our present, and how to make sure to correct the injustices of the past and to ensure they don't reproduce themselves in the present and in the future. It is our responsibility to listen, to discern, and to make recommendations as wisely as we can, and to counsel to act upon recommendations from you, from others, from us, from whomever makes them. While the wheels turn slowly, I want to assure you that they are turning, and to encourage you to keep coming, to keep being heard, to keep letting us know, and to keep holding us to account. So with that, I want to welcome you, and I will ask our staff to take attendance, and then we'll begin the meeting.
You bet. Commissioner Gary?
Here.
Commissioner Grossman?
Here.
Commissioner Kerr? Commissioner Marks? Commissioner Marks is here. Chair Downs?
I'm here.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. I appreciate everyone coming for this special meeting. I know, and I want to express special appreciation to staff for scheduling a meeting in August, which is generally a time when commissions and councils do not meet. So we have a number of agenda items that are on tap for today. As you look ahead, you can see that on those agenda items include a number of things that will come up in our meetings. We'll first deal with our draft minutes, and I'll be glad to hear any motion for the minutes, of the approval of the minutes for our July 7th meeting. Those minutes are attached to our agenda. If we've all had a chance to look over them, I'll be glad to take any motion. Commissioner Grossman.
So moved.
Okay, do I see or hear a second?
I second.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing none, then how about we have a vote? So I think we need to indicate our votes separately to avoid voices being lost in the compression of Zoom. Is that correct, Sid or Isabel? Okay. Do you want to call on people or do you want me to? I can.
Yeah, you can.
Okay. Commissioner Grossman,
Yes.
Commissioner Marks. I saw her say yes. Commissioner Gary.
Yes.
And I also vote yes. So with that, we move the minutes from the meeting of July 7th. The next thing on our agenda is general public comment. You'll see here that the way the agenda works is that public comment is on items that are not on the agenda, either to add them to future agendas or to ask the commission to take them up. You'll also see that there will be public comment on each of the agenda items, which include the numerous item 6, including an overview of the community dialogue session, the racial equity impact plan that council has asked for, the survey that council has asked for, our response to the development of a working group, and other items. So if you wish to be heard on those, we'll take public comment on each of those. But we now have time for public comment for things that are not otherwise on the agenda. If you'd like to be heard, indicate by raising your hand. I see a few people have already. Indicate by raising the hand within the Zoom app. And city staff will move you on for up to 3 minutes in the order in which they see that you have signed in. So are we ready? Let's see. I think I see at least 3 hands up. And you want to start moving the first public comment in? Okay, Jeremiah Piguelo.
Yeah, my name is Jeremiah. So a few point of interest here. I'm going to try to keep it as social and positive and as possible. But, I got a lot of frustration. It's been years, you guys. Still no shower, right? And the only shower Albany has to offer is some homeless program in Berkeley. So that's still where we're at. City of Albany has no shower program for anybody. They refer it to a homeless program in Berkeley. That's what's going on, point of interest. Still, to this day, another change of subject here. You guys sat around and watched my RV be towed illegally out from underneath me, Sid, everybody, last year, okay? Does that make sense? Okay, I'm from Albany and I live in an RV, right? To put a roof over my head so I'm not homeless. But instead of the police, instead of you helping me, you steal my RV in the middle of the night and make me even more homeless. I mean, go figure. Where's your common sense? If you were really trying to help me, you guys would not have taken my home from me. Another point of interest. This is the Social Economic Justice Committee. How economic is it for you guys to house these homeless that you've been housing for the past 4 or 5 months in a hotel room for $100 a night? That's $3,000 a month. You guys are treating these homeless people, not me, you're treating random homeless people that aren't even from Albany. They're overflow from Berkeley using Albany's resources, okay? Duh. $3,000 a month. Go on Craigslist. You can go to a Gateview, Pierce Street, 555 Pierce Street, and rent a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom condo. I think even the penthouse is $3,000 a month. So you're putting homeless people in a hotel for $3,000 a month when you can go rent a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom condo. So why don't you go rent a 2-bedroom, bathroom condo for these homeless people and save a little money? Or go rent an ADU, an accessory dwelling unit. Go on Craigslist right now $1,800, $1,400, $1,800, all these ADUs in people's backyards in Albany. But no, you want to kick these people out of Albany. I see the games you're playing, but you guys, I see right through all your games, you know, so please, I still have no shower. I still have no home. Thanks for stealing my RV from me. And you guys have done nothing. You sat around and watched it this whole time, this whole year. I mistakenly went to the city council meetings and voiced my opinion instead of coming to your meetings the following day. But you sat around and did nothing. All right. Hear me out. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. I think City Clerk Sue will bring in the next person. And I believe it's Susan Moffett. And Susan, it looks like you're now on.
Yes, hi, thank you. First, I don't know the details of Mr. Pinguelo's situation, but I hope that his concerns will be addressed. What I'd like to talk about is to request that minutes be provided for the meetings of the Social and Economic Justice Commission. I think members of the public who are attending today, if they wanted to know what happened at the previous meeting and they looked at the minutes, which are attached to the agenda, they would find basically no information. All it says is that discussion occurred. It doesn't have any information on the content of the discussion or public content because these are so-called action minutes only. And I think in the interest of transparency and fruitful discussion, it's really important to have real minutes so that people who are not at the meeting can know what happened. And also what would be helpful is if transcripts could be automatically produced on YouTube or Zoom, which is possible and which is done for some city meetings and not others. And I'm not sure why it's not regularized, but I just want to request real minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think City Clerk Sue is bringing in the next speaker, who's David Danby, and I think you're now on.
Hi, it's actually David Danby's wife. This is Julie Winkelstein, and I want to second what Susan just said. I think that's a great idea. I actually never really noticed that there weren't minutes because I attend the meetings. But what I wanted to comment on is the lack of publicity for these meetings. I sent out an email to, I think, everybody on the commission and to city council members, but I think like with the city council meetings, there's no effort to really involve the public because the notices for these are, if you sign up on the website to get SEJC commission meeting notices, then you get it, but it isn't even in the weekly newsletter that comes out on Fridays. It wasn't in that this past time, and I would like to see a much greater effort to reach out to the general public. So that would mean posting on Solano, posting in stores, sending out postcards, posting in the I don't know how churches, community center, library, whatever. I'd like to really see an effort to let the people in the community know that these meetings, as well as the city council meetings, but these meetings are important and that you would actually like people to attend. Very few people know about them because of the lack of publicity. Thank you.
Thank you. I see Commissioner Grossman.
Yeah, I'd just like to request two things. I would like a report from the city at our next meeting on what it's doing in terms of housing homeless people. We haven't had any information about that. And also, I would like to ask that we have a discussion at our next meeting about the general topic of communication of our meetings and minutes. I've also had a long-term concern about action minutes that don't say anything.
Apologies, I was muted. So as I see two people who haven't spoken yet on the public comments.
Oh, I'm sorry. I feel
No, that's okay. I apologize. How about if we take those? Corey Dosty is being moved in.
Hi, SEJC. Just echoing what folks have said and bringing up, I was made aware that as of today, the Albany Police Department is lifting their policy that restricted the handling of abandoned vehicle calls. So there's going to be more towing. And having been at the city council meeting where Jeremiah spoke, it does sound like there's no evidence that due process was followed around towing and documenting and all of that stuff. Obviously, I don't know the particular details, but I do think that that's going to be a big concern, especially since shelter in place hasn't been lifted. So I would like to see that be a topic, and I do think that's relevant to social and economic justice. So just the concerns around, as we remain in shelter in place, towing and impounding abandoned vehicles and all of that. Thank you.
Thank you. I see one more person who has not spoken, and that's Deborah Perkins Kalama. And then at the end of that, we'll move to announcements and have public comment on each of the agenda items. You're on.
Hi, I'd kind of like to support Julie's comment about notification to the public. I have long admired the kiosk that's up at the top of the street near, I don't know what the cross street is. It's in Berkeley. It's near a restaurant. What is it called? It's a restaurant on the left-hand side of a beautiful kiosk that was built by, I'm not sure which group, but I think something like the Rotary Club or maybe Lions, or maybe we could encourage some group to build us a kiosk down in Albany, because that thing at least has a way to, a place to post notifications and reminders about such things as this meeting and the city council meetings. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I think the other hand I see is someone who's already spoken in public comments, and we'll be glad to receive comments under the agenda items. But for the opening public comment, we've now heard at least once from each person who indicated an interest. So let's move on to announcements from staff and from members. Do we want staff to go first?
Mhm.
We have no announcements.
All right. Announcements from members. Commissioner Marks.
Unmuting. Okay. Okay. I just wanted to say that 51% of the citizens of Albany are renters. Now, our city council and the Alameda County's council did extend the moratorium on evictions, but I'm very concerned about what's going to happen when that moratorium is lifted, what people are going to do about rents. Now, I saw that the city of Berkeley and the city of Alameda are using CARES money to help supplement people's rents. One disturbing, we're talking about race in Albany. One disturbing thing that I saw today was that according to the 2015 housing element, there was a 4% African-American population in Albany. I looked on the U.S. Census website today, it's 2.5% now. In 2008, the figures for 2018 are 2.5%. And the Asian population decreased a little bit too. And that really bothers me. And I think it's probably a lot of white middle-class people that own here, that don't rent. And what my concern is that with a big eviction thing, we're going to lose what minority population we already have in the city. So I just want to say that I feel like as a city, we need to be on the lookout. Majority of people here are renters and we need to protect them. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Marks. Commissioner Gary.
All right, two things. On the last caller about the kiosk, there is I guess a kiosk or some type of area in front of Orange Theory Fitness where I believe the city clerk would go and change out the notifications on what's happening in the city. That hasn't been updated. I don't know how often the city does that, but there is an area where there's documents and postings of the events that are happening. So if we can try to get that updated on a regular basis, I think that would help the public as far as notifying them on meetings. And in response to Commissioner Marks, I'm in total agreement with what you're stating. I also think that, maybe we can consider having a small rent review board to kind of help those that are renters. That's just a suggestion that I think we need to strategize and see how we can help our residents stay in place.
Thank you. Other announcements from commissioners? Commissioner Kerr.
Hello. I just wanted to echo again on what Deborah Perkins Kalama and Commissioner Gary mentioned, which is the public announcement kiosk, which is opposite, I think it's a restaurant called Curry Now or Quick Curry or something on Solano. That was built several years ago with Albany Community Foundation funding. And it was intended as a community notification center. The Albany Community Foundation is currently requesting grant applications, and another request for another kiosk could be made, which would be useful if the city clerk is able to actually staff it and provide updates to the community at that kiosk. It would be an opportunity in this time when individuals without internet access are somewhat excluded from the democratic process. And I think it would be a worthwhile endeavor to have more public notification postings. Telephone poles are nice, but they're not always the same telephone pole, and maybe having another kiosk would be a good idea. So I'd like to encourage anyone who might be interested in that to apply to the Albany Community Foundation for a grant to explore the possibility of another kiosk.
Thank you so much. And Commissioner Grossman, did we take your announcement before, or do you have anything to add?
I have no more announcements. I just wanted to underline that I'd like to see those topics on the next agenda. The whole issue of communication about our meetings and minutes, and the issue of what the city is doing in terms of housing homeless people, other than through Project Hope, which we do get communication about.
I agree, and I hope we can come up with a plan, which I'm glad to help with, and I'm sure other commissioners are too, to think about dissemination possibly again before our August 20th meeting, so that it's not just on the agenda, but that we can try and think of some alternative strategies or ways that we can pitch in to get notifications up ahead of time. So I appreciate all of the comments that came in. The next part of our agenda is presentations. My understanding is we don't have separate presentations that we'll be hearing from our consultants on some of the individual items under agenda item number 6. Is that right? No additional presentations on number 5. Great. So item 6-1 is the next agenda item. And this is discussion, and this is the overview of the community dialogue session. So time for the commissioners to reflect upon the session held on July 16th. This is our first meeting as a commission since then with consultant Nicole Anderson and Associates. We have a number of public comments that are attached to this on the agenda, which are broken down in different ways, some inputted during the dialogue session, others broken down by the different times upon which they were there. Older public comments which reflect this and some other items appear in earlier agendas as well, just for your information. So we'll take we'll want to hear from the public on this, and remind me, I'm a little off timing today. I know that if we have questions, that we do that from the commissioners before public comment and then discussion by the commissioners. But I think but on something like this, am I right that we hear from the public first and then discuss? I just want to make sure I'm not messing up the order.
Usually the other way.
If you have questions for the staff,
Okay.
it would be first, then the public comment, then you come back with commissioner's comment.
Okay. All right. So we also have our joined today, and we'll be hearing soon from both Nicole Anderson and Dr. Shelley Holt, who were involved in the dialogue session as well. So first, if we have any questions from the commission to staff or to them, we'll take those. Then we'll have public comment, and then we'll come back and have a fuller discussion by the commission. Any questions before we go to public comment? All right. At this point, if any members of the public here want to be heard in response to reflections upon the community dialogue session, you can raise your hand within the Zoom feature, as a number of you did it prior. I'll give a minute in case anybody wishes to be heard here. I see one hand up. And so if the city clerk wants to bring in the first person, if other people raise hands during this period, then we'll take that. Otherwise, if this is the only one, then we'll go to discussion by commissioners. So Jeremiah Pinguelo.
Sorry, give me a minute.
Sure, thank you. I know it's difficult.
Go ahead.
Let's see. I think he appears to be on mute.
Jeremiah, you're up.
Okay.
Oh, okay. I thought I had unmuted it earlier. I'm just wondering what is this topic you're referring to here? The public comments regarding the dialogue of what?
So this is in response to a community dialogue session that was held July 16th, 2020 on issues related to racism and equity within the city of Albany, including but not solely policing.
Okay. So I got one thing I think I failed to mention, or I didn't have enough time to bring up. I guess, you guys are, the city wants to pay $6,000 to pay for paint and paintbrushes to paint this Black Lives Matter mural on the Ohlone Greenway, right? Is that correct? The Arts Committee?
I think it's your time to comment, so I don't want to be in a...
let's not discuss it. Okay, no problem. So thank you. It's okay. Well, basically, I think I read another article that went out last week, just another point of interest for everybody be aware of, and you could research this. What happened was the city, just like Albany, paid, let's just say hypothetically, $6,000 out of the city's funds to paint a mural. Well, then a couple weeks later, the city painted over it in the middle of the night. So my saying is, Black Lives Matter and all this stuff, we don't want your money. We don't want this stuff from the city. Black Lives Matter movement, we got our own spray paint. We got our own volunteers. We wish we could paint the town, but if you're giving us a spot, we'll do it because we want to, right? Not because you're paying for it. And if you're paying for it, then it's like you did it and you own it because you paid for it. You bought it. You got receipts to prove that you paid for it. Guess what? It's not yours. The city. It's not yours. It's not your Black Lives Matter. It's for the people. Do you get it? You're trying to own everything. You're trying to get your 2 cents in or your $6,000 in. It's not a donation. You're not donating it. If you want to take that $6,000, then donate it in a Black Lives Matter art fund and let them use the money how they want to use it. That way they can own it. That's what I got to say. And I'm right. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. The next hand, I see one more hand up, and we'll take that. It appears as David Danby, but we'll see if we get David or Julie.
It's me again. So the topic that we're talking about, my understanding is, for some reason I thought you would be talking about it first, is regarding the dialogue session that's correct, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So I was really disappointed in the so-called community-led dialogue session. I felt like it was not led by the community, that it was very top-down. It didn't come from the community. I thought it should have started I think all of the work that needs to be done should start from listening to the community first and then moving out from there rather than starting from the top. Way too much time was spent with the consultant's presentation, with the people on the panel talking. Very little was coming from the community. And I think that if you actually are going to make some changes as the community, it has to be community-led and truly community-led, and not led by you, as the commission, not led by the city council, not led by the police force, but led by what the community feels. And that's one of the reasons why I think it's so incredibly important that the word get out about these meetings, so that you can really be led by the community. For that meeting, my husband and I walked around and posted more than 100 flyers. We went to all sorts of places trying to get the information out. We didn't do that for tonight's meeting, and I don't know what the numbers are tonight and if there's a difference. But I really like to see, and I have information about what community-led dialogues looks like. I could send that to you if you're confused about it. But that was I was truly disappointed, and I felt actually sort of embarrassed that I had encouraged people to come, because I felt like they didn't get a chance to really guide what's happening next. And I hope that this will change, and that it will be led by the community and not be about the staff. And that was the other thing. It seemed to be very much focused on what works for the staff, making the staff comfortable, making sorry, I'm getting an echo. Anyway, it seemed to be very much focused on the staff and the city bodies rather than the community itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. I think I see one more hand, and that's Corey Dosty, who's being moved in, and you're on.
Hi again. I mostly spelled everything out in my email. I know that those don't always get as much, what's verbal versus what's written, and people have different communication styles. But I just want to echo that I think communications around expectations were not in line with what happened with the community dialogue session. That there was the name dialogue implied a back and forth, and the fact that questions were first through the Q&A and sort of picked to fit pre-existing questions, okay, and then the last half hour was public comment, restricted, and it was 2-hour restricted total time, which I didn't see announced ahead of time, and that there was 0 response to the public comments. It felt like another council meeting, and not really different in any way for it to be a dialogue. Maybe through, okay, submit some questions, but you can submit emails and public comments, and sometimes those get picked up and sometimes they don't, just like the questions. So it didn't feel all that different. And I think it's really important to be clear about what the format's going to be like, so that people can adjust expectations and how they're going to participate. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So at this time, I don't see other hands. So we'll move on to discussion among the commission members. So again, the topic of 6.1 is responses to the community dialogue session, and discuss the session. So who would like to be heard? Commissioner Grossman.
I would like to echo some of the comments that speakers just made. First of all, I'm not sure I understand how we've now switched to having the community comment before the commission begins to talk. We've never done it that way before. But that aside, I was also somewhat disappointed in the dialogue session. It really wasn't a dialogue session. The questions, we didn't allow people from the audience to speak directly. So there was no opportunity for them to actually ask questions of the people they wanted to talk to. And then there was about a half hour for people to make comments. And for some reason, it was limited to 2 minutes apiece, which, is not a dialogue. if a person can speak for 2 minutes. That's a board meeting. That's a council meeting. It's not a dialogue session. So I hope that if and when we do this again, it really is a dialogue, which implies that there's conversation, that there's exchange, that people can learn together, rather than that people speak into the ether and with no response. So I think we can learn from that session, and I think we can do a better job.
Apologies, I muted myself. Thank you. Other commissioners? Commissioner Kerr.
I would just like to say that I am still very impressed that this topic has more participants. For those of you who can't see, there are 27 participants on the call, on the meeting tonight. That is more participants than this commission has had in my experience as a commissioner, which goes back several years. And I'm very encouraged by that continued engagement and that continued persistence, despite the barriers of public meeting posting and public meeting rules and Robert's Rules of Order. Despite all that, there is still a huge amount of engagement in this issue. And I find that very encouraging. I don't want to be discouraged by any of the comments that have been made earlier that we are not listening. We are listening and we're hearing, and I do believe that we can find a way forward for this. So please, those of you who are on the call or on the meeting, don't be discouraged by the sense that this is being shut down by me or by any other commissioner on this Social and Economic Justice Commission. That's all.
Thank you. Any other commissioners want to be heard on this topic? Commissioner Marks.
Yes, I wanted to say, I felt that I have a problem, and it's not just with this particular consultant, but with any consultant running a meeting, a city meeting. I think that Greg could have easily have run the meeting, that it didn't need to be run by the consultant. It was Albany citizens speaking, and I think they should have been speaking not to a consultant, but to another citizen. I also felt that the consultant, and I don't mean to, anyway, I felt like the consultant spoke too much. Of the first 60 minutes, she spoke 26 minutes of that. And I think it was advertised a dialogue, and it needed to be more of a dialogue. Also, the statement was made that questions would be answered after the meeting. And as far as I know, people that wrote in questions didn't get them answered. And I think we want people to trust us and to follow, we need to follow through with people. So I would just like to, that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other commissioners want to be heard? Commissioner Gary.
Thank you, Commissioner Marks, for your comments, and Commissioner Kerr. I'm with Commissioner Kerr I'm very encouraged about the steps that we're taking. I think it would be disappointing if the city did absolutely nothing in this climate. If we continue to say we're with you and speaking to the residents, stating that they understand, and absolutely nothing was done. So I think we're taking the right steps to move forward. I think people want things to happen overnight, and it's just not going to be that way. But I would advise or encourage residents that are on this call and watching on YouTube, that we are taking the necessary steps. We're working together. I think for all of us, it's something new, right? And it can be challenging at times, but I think if we continue to move forward, continue to come together as a community, and we actively listen, that we will get the results that we are looking for. That's it.
Thanks so much. I think I want to just echo some of the things that are out there. What I, have read and heard and going through the comments include, two strands that I think have also come through in the comments today. On the one hand, a sense that if we want to do more events like that, we want to keep being thoughtful about the format, that we were trying out a new format. Everything is going to be a little bit, figuring out on the fly in this time period. And that we'll want to keep tinkering with that format, especially if we want people to feel that it is a dialogue and a back and forth. And the second thing is to emphasize the statement made by a number, maybe all of the commissioners, that we recognize the sense that people want action, and we're trying to figure out how to balance the need for input and the need for action, and to both move quickly, but to be moving in response. And so I'm sure we, have things that we can learn about in that process. So we'll take all of this under consideration. At present, we don't have another meeting like that of that type scheduled, but we do have more SEJC meetings, including on August 20th. But we'll keep our eyes focused on that if we decide that another type of that type of session is needed. I don't think we have a motion or necessarily a need for a motion on this matter. If anybody wants to be heard, any of the commissioners want to be heard, then you can be heard. If not, then we can move on to item 6.2. All right. I don't see anybody wanting a second go around on this. So we do appreciate all of your comments. Let's move on to item 6.2. This is the Racial Equity Impact Plan. So this is the charge that we have from the City Council to devise a racial equity impact plan with the help of our consultant, Nicole Anderson and Associates. So Ms. Anderson has submitted a sample template, which is attached on the agenda for those of you who are able to see it at the SEJC site, as well as a informational document that is on the next piece of the next hot link, hyperlink on the agenda. That is a document called The Water of Systems Change, about how change is made. So we will, I believe our format for this, and I apologize if there's any confusion on that account, is that Nicole will give us a quick overview of types of plans and ideas and thoughts. We'll have a back and forth of questions and responses from the commission. We will then go to public comment on the equity action plan, and then we'll then come back to the commissioners for further discussion or any action. Does that sound right? Okay. All right, Ms. Anderson, I think you are on and unmuted.
Yes, thank you so much. Just a quick point of clarity, and I do apologize if I missed this, but I didn't see if there was an opportunity for the ability to share a little bit of kind of feedback as well for the community dialogue. So I know that was the past agenda item, but I felt like I did want to weigh in if that's possible. And if not, I can kind of tie it into our other agenda items, but I want to make sure that I follow your protocol.
No, I'll be, I think it's fine for you to weigh in.
Okay. Excellent. Yeah, and it was just a few things. I first want to say I really was honored to be able to be a moderator for that and recognize my role is not to provide answers, but more of context and to moderate based on the vision of the SEJC commission to be able to create a panel that can provide opportunities for discussion. I want to echo a couple of things that were said earlier as well with regards to it being a public meeting format. I think that always is going to present challenges. And I want to say that because in moving forward, as we plan for future dialogues, which is what we said, right, that we would continue these conversations. And so there were many questions that were not answered. And I think Commissioner Mark, you mentioned that there were questions that weren't answered, and that causes quite a bit of discomfort and non-closure, which is kind of what we set the tone for, that there's going to be a lot of non-closure because there's never enough time. We purposely said we didn't want to make it where it's a meeting that goes till 1 o'clock in the morning, but we want to do multiple meetings like that to provide a space for people to provide ongoing feedback. So I hope that the community gets to hear that clearly from SEJC in the future as well, is that non-closure. I too echo, I don't like that. That's the one piece about this particular structure. We don't like to have closure and people not have their voices heard. That's the total opposite of the purpose. But I also realized too, something to consider in moving forward is the format of the panelists. So I think we tried to have a variety of voices to be heard. We had students, we had obviously our police chief, we had different staff, partnerships. And so I think in the end, the future panel needs to also be considered, as you continue to do this, and knowing that some of those questions, some of the panelists weren't in a position to answer. So I think there was a lot of listening going on, but then there was also space where people had questions that maybe weren't answered because of context. And so I think to just consider that there were so many questions and comments that came in. And for those that are listening, I just really appreciate what has been shared. People have reached out to me as well as Dr. Shelley to just share kind of, comments more than anything. I know they've shared them with you. And there's lots of questions that are still left undone, which I think is the essence of the work of this commission. And so I think I really appreciate the opportunity to hear that there's a commitment for next steps. I think the community heard that. I think Vice Chair Gary, you had shared about, this is, we're making progress, right? There's some movement forward, but we have a long ways to go, and we're not going to do all of this overnight. And so I think in that, the things that were shared, there's a lot of needs that have been identified that came up that is going to kind of feed into, I think, the next item on your agenda, which is your action plan. And some real data that we're going to have to unpack to recognize how do we better support the city council in making decisions about what the needs are of the community. So I just want to acknowledge that, and I want to just echo and acknowledge the pain. I think we didn't do that enough. I think that the pain in the community was heard in many comments. I know that I want to just reiterate that as recognizing and acknowledging the pain right now. And I just want to acknowledge SEJC for hosting that event, because I think that means a lot to the community to provide a space. I think I heard someone say we've never done this before, and that's powerful. So I just want to leave you with encouragement for that particular agenda item, that there's so much richness that came out of that, but also there's lots of non-closure, lots of discomfort, and this is the work. So I'm really excited for you. And again, Commissioner Marks, I want to appreciate your comments about my role. You shared that prior, and I hope that we'll continue to build upon what that looks like as a moderator, what that role is, who does that. I think as long as the work happens, it's not a personal preference. It was something I was asked to do, and this is something that we do, is we moderate, but I think also we can learn from that. So I just appreciate your comments as well. And all of you in terms of that work. And so the glows and the grows of that event, I take more glows out of that. There were great things that happened. I look forward to continuing that work with you, and look forward to hearing the community and keeping that door open, hoping and encourage us not to close that door. We've opened it and we want to continue that work. So I just want to share that comment. Thank you, Chair Downs, for that time for that item.
Do you want to go ahead to discuss the equity action plan? Oh, we may have.
Yeah. And yes, I do. And Dr. Shelley, I believe, is on the call too. So I want to make sure I don't.
I see her. Yes.
Is she there? Yeah, I'm on my other device, so I can't see everyone. But I guess if I could swap over, I could see her. There she is. So Dr. Shelley, before I move to 6.2 to help the commission move to the action plan piece, would you like to add anything that I may have forgotten?
I think the only thing I would add, and this is for the council and the community's benefit, is just to recognize how long this has been going on and how long it's going to take to fix. We do this work all over the country, and as we've talked with all of the city council folks and the mayor and the police chief and folks on this council as well, it can often feel like it needs to happen yesterday. I've been in Berkeley, I've been in the community, I've been at the rallies, I get it. And in my 20s, I would have been right there with you, marching and everything else. And now I'm approaching it in a different way, but just recognize that this work takes a lot of time to do. And it's not going to happen overnight. We talked our last meeting about 400 years of institutionalized racism, over 400 years of laws created to make things the way that they are. It is not going to happen overnight just because someone killed George Floyd and now we're all in an uproar. It's not going to happen overnight. And I get it, I empathize with it, but we have to walk through this process. And very excited to be able to walk through this process with everyone, but we just have to make sure that we are all very realistic about the time it's going to take for us to heal and move forward. but I want to just reiterate, we hear you loud and clear. We have said on every one of these meetings, we don't say much, but we hear all of the voices that are being expressed. We agree with many of the sentiments, we disagree with others, but that's not even the point. The point is it's going to take us some time to work through this. And so if we can all offer each other a little grace and allow us to be able to move into this, and just again, thank you for choosing us, but also thank you for engaging in this work, because I can tell you from other places, Albany is very far ahead of the game. I know it doesn't feel that way, but very far ahead of the game, very far. Because oftentimes it takes us about 2 years just to get people to this point in having a conversation that Albany is able to have. And that's just factual data from our experience. So just know that I hear the folks in the community. I can't see everyone. I hear the urgency, and we all have an urgency, and we want this fixed tomorrow, but that's not the way this work goes. So just wanted to offer that little tidbit for everyone, and thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shelley. So Commissioner, Chair Downs, would you like me to move to the next item now? I just want to make sure we spoke to the committee.
Yes, please. Yes, we're on the equity action plan. So we got your sample template on the agenda document and other things you want to present in terms of what the equity action plans can and have look like. Thank you.
So for this particular item, again, we don't intend for this to be a long discussion, but yet it's a critical part of the discussion. When we were asked to come and work with you, I think the spirit of this work was around creating a plan and really being intentional and calling out race, calling out institutional racism. So for this item, what I wanted to do is just walk you through what that item could look like and kind of help you see the big picture in all of your work in making recommendations to City Council about what the city should do to address this. It needs to show up in an actual kind of package called an action plan. We call it a racial equity impact plan. Some people call it a diversity and inclusion plan. I don't think today is the day we wrestle with what the word is, but the vision is that there be a plan that includes a framework of how to do this work in Albany and some key focus areas that the city can focus on and have some measurable outcomes. And so in the work that you're doing now, you have subcommittees, you obviously have, and we'll talk about another agenda item, obviously dealing with the police concerns that have come up, which will fold into this plan. So for this piece, if you can just kind of envision the big picture is a plan that it has multiple components. And so what I'm gonna do, if possible, can I think I have permission to share my screen, is that correct? I think I do have it. And while I'm pulling that up, you got several items in your packet. One is an actual document called Embracing Equity. I'm not sure how many of you had a chance to look at it. I don't anticipate you need to have read it all tonight, but as we break up into our work this very near future, it's important to have context about how action planning is so critical to this work and some of the components that need to be fleshed out. Also, the purpose of it is to really help you move into systemic change. Our goal is that the work you do as SEJC, that there is a culture created for change, that regardless of who's on the commission, who's on the council and the city, that there's a culture for this work. And so having a blueprint is important, but having a system lens is even more critical. And so what I want you to also reference is the Water of System Change article. I'm not sure how many of you had a chance to look at that yet, but it speaks to the different levels in the system that we have to consider when we want to make lasting change. And our example that we use often, because there's so many cities and actual school districts that are addressing things like police, because that came up quite a bit and obviously is a very important topic. And what we talk about is not only looking at policies and practices when you want to address an issue, but also looking at the stakeholders whose voices have not been at the table to be a part of that decision making. So making sure that there's inclusiveness, which I know this is the essence of this committee, of this commission. Also looking at the relationships of the different entities within the city. We have to consider that, bringing those folks together who have not been talking, who haven't been at the table. A really great example that came up on our listening session, which is something that I've been aware of, is the relationship with the city and the relationship with the school district. They are two very integral pieces of the city that have to come together in this type of work. and can't be in a silo effect. And that's with any organization. We have to have relationships that are cultivated, partnerships. And of course, the biggest piece of this work, which is the biggest part of the struggle, I can say, is the shifting of the mental model. And that's the belief systems, that's the culture, that's the mindset that exists within a community when we want change. So I want to make sure that you understand the essence of our facilitation is really focused on system change so that this work will last. That is really important to us. And it goes beyond just a year or two, which is what you have probably seen sometimes, and where the community shows some frustration is we've talked about things before, we tried it, it didn't last. We want this work to last. So I gave you, sent those 2 documents to you to really help you with where the work will go and some of the framework that we'll actually explore to unpack some of the real issues that you want to address in your action plan. So what I'm going to do, and I want to pause because I want to make sure before I move forward that if you have thoughts or questions about what I just shared in terms of the documents, if there's any clarifying questions.
I might just say for the benefit of the public that the documents that Ms. Anderson is speaking about are on the agenda under the supporting documents for this item. And I did not mention before, the first document of with the water in the title, and the second one that she mentioned, Embracing Equity, appears right behind that in the same PDF.
Okay.
So in case anybody was looking for that and didn't see it, it's located under the same hyperlink tab if it opens with the water document.
Perfect. Yeah, I appreciate that, Chair Downs. And part of the context of that is really just to make sure that the community knows that we have numerous forms of research that we are utilizing to help drive this work. And so in developing a plan, there's a lot that goes into that. And so we want to make sure that they're very familiar and that you're familiar as a commission on how we're approaching this work. Just a couple of things I want to pull up. I'm not going to go through a PowerPoint slide. I'm actually just pulling up a couple of things that I want to allude to. So one is, before I share this particular kind of components of the plan, I want to remind us of, and actually in your documents, you got the elephant and the blind man and the elephant poem. And the essence of this is really more around continuously recognizing that we are going to be working with different perspectives to come up with this plan as SCJC, obviously City Council, and any of the different groups that are going to weigh in on this. And I want us to just honor the process and recognize that we are going to be addressing institutional racism, which is the elephant in the room, literally, but also recognizing, honoring the different perspectives. And this blind man in the elephant poem really is alluding to the fact that we all have different perspectives and also blind spots. And so that means that we're going to have to continue to unpack this work together and recognize that everyone may have different perspectives. They may see racial equity work as just the ear, and then that blind man is grabbing that ear and says, that's a fan. Where someone else may say, you know what, that's our school district right there. We need to address our school district when we talk about racism. And then there's the gentleman who's holding on to the tail and he's thinking that's a rope. And he may say, this is the police department. This is a police department. But then there's another arguing about, hey, you know what? The one that's holding on to the leg of the elephant is like, this is a tree trunk. And he's saying that this is the housing, homelessness issues. And so you see where we're going, that our action plan will have to include all these multiple perspectives. But the work is that all of these blind men are having a dialogue. And they're unpacking what it is, because ultimately we all have to understand we're trying to unpack institutional racism, which affects all aspects of a system, an organization, a city such as Albany, as with many others. So I want to share that just to give a little context of the action plan, because ultimately this is going to be the non-closure that's going to exist when we're trying to unpack this work. And so one of the, here it is. So one of the, I want to speak specifically to this item, and then it's going to overlap and we'll come back to it. So the key components of this racial equity impact plan, and these are, again, just suggestions, kind of recommendations, but we are going to have to do some subcommittee work, roll up our sleeves and really unpack this. And so the idea that, we really want to recommend is that you have the lens for creating a plan that's at least looking at 10 years out. And we say 10 years and we call it Albany 2030. That doesn't have to be the name, but that's just something we thought about. In 2030, what does it look like when we've addressed racial equity issues in Albany? And the spirit of that is really thinking about the research around implementation science, the research around understanding that to see real change, you're going to have to go out at least 10 years to see any real change happen. And we're talking about system change. So we're hoping that SEJC will consider in our planning together that you will see this as a long-term plan and not just in the next 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, but that all of those metrics will be involved in this plan. So if you can envision, what you see on the right side is just kind of a table of contents that comes from what could be the components of a plan. I'm not going to go through each of those, but I do want to share some of the big picture, some of the chunks that need to be considered during this planning time. This is going to require quite a bit of work. And of course, in collaboration with us, we will support a lot of this work behind the scenes as necessary. Part of this particular plan has to help create some sense of what equity actually means. The word equity has come up, racial equity has come up, institutional racism, diversity, inclusion. I can name all of these different words. There has to be some common language and understanding of what this work is about. And so it is critical that as the city has a mission and vision statement, that SEJC really weigh in on what is our vision around equity in Albany. If it's racial equity, what is that? So we're going to have to roll our sleeves up and really create a definition that everyone understands so that that becomes the lens by which decisions are made. And so in this recommendation to City Council, having that lens is important when making decisions about budgets, making decisions about how we reallocate resources, all the things that matter that have come up. This equity lens is very critical in this work. So that's a big component of that plan. And obviously in there, having those multiple terms be spelled out so the community understands what each of these words mean, so we can have a dialogue that's fruitful and really eliminate some of the barriers or misunderstandings to this work. Another big component, which we'll need to get some feedback from you on, is this piece around the research that SEJC is going to have to do. And when we say research, meaning that we have a lot of work to unpack. We have a lot of data that we're going to have to gather through surveys, through really doing some research and really understanding what are going to be the key focus areas of the impact plan. There are a lot of things to tackle, and we don't want to say we can tackle them all, but we have to really prioritize the work. So this plan will help prioritize the work. And I'm really excited because SEJC has already identified some key areas. So this is really about massaging those, making some adjustments, but I think you have a really good foundation for your plan already. So Dr. Shelley and I are really excited about that. But one of our, real pieces of this work has to come through the subcommittee work. So I know you have subcommittees that exist now, and we definitely want to get your feedback on that in a moment. But we're going to have to develop or evolve those subcommittees and possibly new subcommittees. Based on just the survey piece alone, based on trying to unpack some of the research that has to be done to allow you to really make some key action steps and recommendations. So we can talk about that in 1 second. And the last big component of the plan is really the plan itself, the framework for how to do this work, some of the tenets for how to actually create that change, and then the actual impact plan with the action steps, the metrics, the timeline, who's going to do the work. For those of you that are familiar with SMART goals, it's really just a very similar concept. So that's really the essence of the plan. And so when you think about, how this may look, right now it's at very preliminary kind of stages, but we definitely as consultants have a framework for you that we want to basically pull out and really work with each of the subcommittees to gain input on this plan so that it really authentically is your plan. And so I'm going to pause for a second and ask Dr. Shelley if you want to add anything to this before we jump into the conversation about potential subcommittee work and also conversations about the survey, which will actually be the next agenda item. So is there anything that you want to add in, Dr. Shelley, about this particular piece of the work? And then we can kind of open it up for some questions from the commission.
Only thing I would mention, like I said, it was about time, and I'll hold my comments for the portion on the survey where I'll have a bit more to add.
Okay, excellent. For the commission, Chair Downs, I don't know how you want to go through this, but I definitely think this is a really important time to allow the commission to just give some feedback on the vision for a plan. I gave kind of a brief overview. So yeah, if you want to help us out in that, I can stop sharing the screen if you like, or keep it up. Just
That
let
would
me know.
be, that would be great. It'd be helpful
Okay.
if we can see the commissioners.
Perfect.
We can come back to it if anybody, requests that. There we go. So I think the next step, we appreciate that and your work, and appreciate also the focus on, the dual nature of what can be done now. What do we need to build in to make sure that, things aren't flashes in the pan, but that continue to have an impact. And also appreciate your thoughts on some of the different ways that it can be structured. Understanding that we'll all be developing, this plan will be an object in motion, right? So that what
Yep.
Ms. Anderson has presented with us is a framework for us to start wrestling with and to thinking about how we want to, divide the work, how we want to revisit it, and what are the outcomes that we want to see, knowing that we may be, that none of these are irrevocable decisions. We might, have a different area we pick up later. That we don't, immediately state now and we pick up later, and so on. And I think that it may well be, as you mentioned, that we want to create some specialized subcommittees. But I think that should follow from the discussion of the commission about what are the areas that they want to prioritize and focus on. And so to hold that off. And again, a survey we'll talk about, but as the next agenda item. So I think the next piece would be to ask commissioners for questions for Ms. Anderson as our panelist, and then we will, and then if we have any initial thoughts from commissioners, then we'll go over to public comment, and then we'll come back from public comment to have additional discussion by the commissioners, if that makes sense to everyone. All right, so Commissioner Marks.
Hi, I read through the race equity and the action guide, and I was very impressed with it. And this quote really stuck out to me. It said, "It is not just the absence of discrimination and inequities, but the presence of deliberate systems and supports to achieve and sustain racial equity." So I read that. I thought, that's what I want for my city, right? I don't want to just say, well, we don't discriminate here. It needs to be better than that. We need to be better than we thought we could be. And I thought that was like a perfect quote to describe that. So I think this is great.
Thank you so much, Margie. Other questions, initial comments from commissioners? Questions for Ms. Anderson, initial comments from commissioners? Commissioner Kerr.
I want to thank Nicole and Dr. Shelley for the presentation. I want to just reflect on the fact that my first introduction to the blind people and the elephant was over 30 years ago. And at the time, this was in a workshop that I was participating in with Kaiser Permanente when we were working on issues of diversity and inclusion. At the time, one of the things that was so critical to determining how people who can't, none of us can see the whole picture, but what we need is metrics. And the only way that we can draw a picture of an elephant in 2020 or in 2030, and hopefully in both of those timeframes, is to have metrics which are consistent across time. So without measuring, and whether that's a public survey or whether that's measuring the diversity within our employees and within our elected officials and our appointed officials, whatever it is, we have to have some standards and some metrics going forward. So I'm hoping that our plan will include those.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Kerr. Commissioner Grossman.
I think that there's an inherent tension here that we have to be aware of. First of all, we five are not Albany. So we absolutely need to be reaching out to Albany from the beginning to find out what people's experience is. The survey is part of that. I think some dialogue sessions as we go along and develop this so that the input is constant and we constantly refine that. so that at the end we have something that everyone in the community can say, you know, we had a piece in this. We had a room to make our point. I think that's very important. And at the same time, I think as we work on the long-term effort to put this together, we are going to have to deal with some short-term issues as we go. Time is crucial with these things, and the window starts to close after a while. And I don't know how many reports I've seen be produced that went on a shelf somewhere and never were looked at again. So we're going to have to keep this conversation alive, and make sure that nobody goes to sleep at the switch. And in terms of the metrics we need, you know, I think people in the community have been very clear and have told us at various times that we need to know a lot more about what's going on with police. We need to know a lot more about what's going on with city staff and city institutions. And we're going to need the city to cooperate with us in producing those numbers, because we don't have access to that information. So we're going to need a lot of staff support with this. And I think, you know, the city needs to be clear about that up front. Thanks.
Thank you, Bart. Other commissioners want to be heard? All right. So I appreciate those comments and appreciate the introduction from Ms. Anderson. We will take public comments on the Equity Action Plan. Then we'll all come back together and continue discussion and look toward any kind of resolution in terms of either formulating subcommittees or whatever else the commission has moved to do. Is that good, Nicole?
Yeah, I just want to
I saw you unmute. Go ahead. Pardon?
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to make sure I got clarity on us being able to leave tonight with some understanding about where subcommittee work may go. So that's later, that's fine, but I would want to make sure we didn't miss that, because we need to hear that as consultants. So we can make some plans to really hit on all the comments that were just made, which were very powerful. Thank you.
No, thank you. I think, you know, I don't want to speak for all the commissioners, but I believe I've heard all the commissioners say at different points that they, you know, understand the urgency of acting and of being able to act more quickly than we can in our full commission meetings. So, you know, we'll certainly when we come back from public comment, be looking, I think my vision is that we try and isolate some areas we know we want to focus on, and think about if there are people that, you know, we know could formulate at least the first version of those subcommittees, so that they can work with you on a more expeditious manner. And then the, you know, commission hearings, you know, start reporting back on some of the early work on the efforts to define those. But that's you know, up to the will of the commission. So I see a couple of hands up, so we'll do public comment, then we'll come back for further discussion and action by the commission. So City Clerk Sue, if you want to wave in the first person, Jeremiah Pinguelo, you're on.
Hey, all my thoughts, these are all point of interest. You know, I'm being respectful to everybody. I'm not sure if they're in a certain order, but they all tie in with each other. So basically, we could spend all this money and try to figure out all these policies to implement, but, you know, I have an easy solution for all this stuff. Everybody just needs to check themselves. You know, it's like, you got to follow that golden rule, you know, treat others how you want to be treated. Everybody today is just so quick to just to beat you up if you're not wearing a mask. I mean, it's ridiculous. But anyway, I'm trying to stick to the topic here, okay? I'm a longshoreman, and I'm working right now in San Francisco up here 80. And I got all these longshoremen coming in, and they're calling themselves the N-word. Okay. Hey, what's up, N-word? Oh, how you doing, N-word? And I'm like, wow. It's you know, it's really shocking for me to hear these guys call themselves that N-word, that degrading word that's so disrespectful. They call themselves the N-word. And it's like, it's so institutionalized among themselves. So until they stop calling themselves the N-word, I mean, we can implement all these policies we want, but you see what I'm saying? It's like, I don't know. And then I'll be the leg. I'll be the leg on this elephant here, because like you said, I'm the leg. Okay. We need to take the word black out of this. Why can't it be like, you know, you're from Africa? Because if we keep these colors, there's always going to be racism if you're associated to a color. I mean, what do you associate brown with? Mexico. Yellow. When I say the word yellow, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Asian, Oriental? What if I say red? What if your skin's red? What's the thought in your head right now? Indian, maybe native? Okay, if I say white, what comes to your mind when I say white? Maybe from Europe? You know, if I say black, okay, you're from Africa. I mean, why does everybody have to be a color? You know, we're human beings. Just because you're from a different part of the world doesn't mean you have to be a color. You know, and race will always be there if we keep separating ourselves by colors, you know? So I don't know. I think the solution is, you know, these young kids got it going on. They have common sense. These kids, there's no racism in first or second or third grade. You know, it's because these kids are following the golden rules that we all once abide by. Treat others how you want to be treated. You know, respect people and be nice to others. It's actually fun to hold the door open for somebody. It's fun to make a new friend. It's fun to smile and say hi to somebody. So until people quit this negative attitude and everybody's judging everybody, be on everybody's back, we all just need to be nice, and humanity needs to change and stop calling each other by colors. And we're just human.
Jeremiah, your time is up.
Okay. Oh, thanks. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Okay.
I think City Clerk Sue is bringing in the next speaker. And I believe it's going to be Susan Moffett. And Susan, I think you're now on. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. I appreciate what the consultants have told us about going slow to go fast, and that there's not going to be closure, but it is essential that we make some progress at each meeting. And it's unacceptable that we get no new information to questions that were asked a long time ago. I've been at the city meetings June 14th, July 6th, July 7th, July 16th, July 20th, and now tonight. And there are basic questions about policing, about the police budget, many basic questions that were asked back in June that could easily be answered at the following meeting that we all keep asking over and over. And many of us are losing patience. It's not about solving a problem overnight. It's about making progress and getting some information and having some transparency. I have a concern about the plan, the template that has been presented. I've had the experience of seeing consultants' plans in Albany that presented that are kind of boilerplate, plan of general principles and goals, and that could be applied in any city, and then they are presented as a plan for Albany. I've seen this at the Arts Committee and elsewhere, and that kind of plan is not very useful. And I'm concerned looking at the table of contents of the plan that really the key things are getting information specific to Albany. And so the item that says history of institutional racism in Albany, that is where we need to dig in and get some specifics. I don't see exactly where research and interviews with individuals would be included in this. I think including language from the testimony of people who have experienced disproportionate policing in Albany, the letters to the editor, these need to be included. The voices need to be included in the final report, and additional research needs to be done. And I'm just concerned that in terms of the way the contract has been written, that there really isn't time for the consultants to do the necessary research, because all of their time is taken with facilitation. And the work of doing that research, which is not done in groups, but is done individually and results in written information, that is really what we need to be hiring somebody to do, because that is not easily done by commission members who have full-time jobs. So I'm just a little concerned about the non-specificity of what might come out of the plan. Thank you.
Thank you. I see we have one more public comment I think City Clerk Sue is moving in David Danby. And if there is further comment after that, that comes up during this comment, we'll do that. Otherwise, we'll move on to commissioner discussion. Well,
Thank you. This is Julie Winkelstein again. I really appreciate everything that Susan Moffett just said, and probably a lot better than I could say it. For me, it was sort of just a dissatisfaction, but she actually expressed it really well, that this does feel boilerplate to me looking at this. And actually a lot of the documents feel like I'm taking a graduate class where somebody's throwing a bunch of documents at me. There's a lack of realness about what's happened so far. I think, again, going back to the community, and I totally agree with Susan that taking the questions that have been asked and answering the questions, not making people wait, not saying we're on this specific agenda, here's how we're going to do it. You'll have to hold your questions and maybe eventually we'll answer them. I just really appreciate everything that she had to say. I also wanted to just comment on Commissioner Kerr's comment about metrics. And I'm not sure if that's the same as accountability. But to me, accountability should be a huge thing in this, that I think that laying out a plan for Albany and how we're going to address racism and systemic racism and how we're going to move forward as a city, there needs to be accountability and built into that. And I'm just not sure that it's there. And then I also agree with Commissioner Grossman that we need involvement of the community. I think that's, as I said before, I think that's really critical. And again, I ask, how are they going to know? How are they going to know that you want them to be involved? For example, there are 27 people on the call tonight. When we went out and put up 100 flyers, the last meeting, and maybe it was just a coincidence, but there were at least twice as many, no, 5 times as many as that. And I think part of that is just not making the effort to really hear from everyone and letting people know that you care. So this scares me, seeing these documents. I feel like we're just being buried in documents and buried in jargon and buried in theories, and that I want to see some real conversations about real stuff, and I want the community to be here doing that. Thank you.
thank you so much. All right, at this point, I don't see any other public comments, so we'll move to commissioner discussion. And we'll take public comments again on the survey on our next agenda item. So the things that I see, that I could imagine us doing, in this time period would include both discussions on the overall nature of a plan, but also on the specific areas that we want to put on the table from the beginning, knowing that we can come back and add others later as we move forward. The specific items that we want to put on the table from the beginning is things that the plan might address, as well as other, issues that people want to bring up about, how to ensure that there's outcomes and accountability and those types of issues. So we should, I think it'd be great to hear from commissioners on any of those issues and on other things that they think need to be on the table, so that we can leave this part of our meeting with a sense of, at minimum, what are the next steps that we're going to do as a commission, so that we're moving forward between meetings, ideally with some subcommittees that are focused on them. So who would like to be heard? Commissioner Gary.
First of all, I want to thank Nicole and Dr. Shelley for presenting the information. Also want to thank the public comments that have been made. And I guess my question or concern is with the public, why haven't we answered the questions that have been submitted? And why can't we answer those questions? We have a link that was sent to us with all the public comments before the meeting and after the meeting. And I believe that the public does deserve an answer. There was questions to the police chief. There was questions to the staff, why we're avoiding that. So somehow we need to be able, if we're going to move this plan forward, we need to respect that this community is speaking out. They want to be heard, but they also want to know that their questions are being answered. So if we're going to waste their time and have them come to these meetings and nothing gets answered from them, then we might as well throw in the towel and forget the whole plan. We have to make sure that we're answering the questions. We need to answer them clear and concise. Some information we may not be able to give them because of privacy issues and concerns, but we still have to acknowledge the fact that the community is speaking and we need to answer.
Thank you. Other commissioners? Commissioner Grossman.
Muted, I'm sorry. I want to follow up on that. I think it would be a good idea to set up a short-term committee, subcommittee to coordinate all the questions that have been asked and work with us, with staff to direct them to where they need to go and produce answers. Right now, nobody is responsible for addressing these things, and therefore nothing happens. So, if a couple of us could just be in charge of, for however long it takes, it shouldn't take very long. And if we're unable to get answers to particular questions, we can report that back to and why. So that's my suggestion for how we kind of make this into something real.
So, Chair Downs, before we move forward, can we strategize on how we can get this information to the public? Or at least, come up with a way, if two of us, one of us, or staff can come in, can we do that before we move further?
Absolutely. I see Commissioner Kerr. I think you're muted, Judy.
I completely agree with the comments that have been made already about a responsibility to respond to questions that have been asked by the public, and I would like us to move ahead with getting answers to those questions. But I really see us as a commission struggling with the elephant and really understanding what it is that we're trying to do. I think in essence, there are two different agenda items that we're talking about in this conversation. One is diversity and equity going forward and institutional racism within the city of Albany. And the second agenda item, which is really, truly, to my mind, a different agenda item, the question of police oversight and the question of the potential for police brutality within the city of Albany. To my knowledge, and I have to say I don't have access to information, but to my knowledge, there has not been reported incidents of brutality. However, those are two separate prongs to a single commission's work. And I really think that we need to be careful when we go forward that we don't get conflated and we don't get confused and we don't confuse the people who are hanging in there on the line talking about this stuff. Because some of those folks want to talk about what equity looks like in 2030, and some of those people want to talk about what the budget looks like in 21. So I think it's important for us as a commission to stay focused and to be very clear when we talk to either of these agenda items, which one we're talking about. With regard to equity in 2030, I would very much like to see us create a survey to the public in Albany and repeat that at whatever intervals we feel are appropriate, 5 years, 4 years, 2 years, I'm not sure. But I think we need to ask the same questions over and over again to see if we're making progress toward becoming a more inclusive community. And I do think that we have a separate agenda item in which we're going to look at the question of policing oversight, and I think we should keep that as a separate conversation. So those are my comments.
Thank you. One thing I wonder, just in terms of moving in a fashion where we don't lose track of things, I've heard a number of people talk about the idea of a subcommittee that's specifically focused, which presumably would be two people, working with staff and potentially the consultants on identifying questions and getting answers to those and finding a way of getting those responses presumably on the city website. Do we want to decide about acting upon that? And then, we can move into our broader discussion about, how to move forward with, finding the pieces of the equity action plan. Bart.
I move that we create a subcommittee to organize all the questions that have been posed by the community and others that we may have that require answers from the city staff. And the job of that committee would be to organize that information, to work with staff members, and to get responses back as quickly as possible.
I second that motion.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Is there discussion?
I'm going to ask Commissioner Grossman to be a little more specifically when he talks about as quickly as possible. I don't know what that means.
What that means, yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
What that means.
Sorry, are you
is
done,
that-
Commissioner Kerr? Because I know Commissioner Grossman wants to respond. I just want to make sure you get to finish your question.
I would like us to be very specific with not just the timeline, but with the overall assignment and the overall task of this subcommittee, because I think Commissioner Grossman has laid it out fairly clearly that it's to respond to public questions, but in what format, in what timeline, and in regard to questions that we don't have answers to, where do we go with those?
So Commissioner Grossman, and then Commissioner Marks.
I don't see this as a very long-term effort. I see it as a matter of weeks. I see it as a matter of taking the information that's there, organizing it, meeting with the appropriate staff people, seeking those answers, putting them in writing and bringing them back. So I see that happening quickly. There may then be longer-term questions, but that would be for a later point. But I do think that we need to respond both for for the sake of the community and for our own sake, because we need this information. I don't really think, by the way, that you can separate policing from issues of racism. Certainly, a report on racism that did not deal with police would be missing one of the main areas that concern people. So that's aside from what I'm suggesting right now, which is that I think we need to get ourselves together to collect this information, give it back to the city, and also we will need it for the report.
Commissioner Marks. I think you're still muted, Margie.
I just want to clarify that when we go through these questions, we're talking about the emails and letters that people sent to the council and to the SEJC. Also, during the dialogue session, people were writing questions, in the note section or whatever. And I want to make sure that we're going to answer those questions. Now, I know a lot of the letters that were sent to the city council and the SEJC were a form letter, but mixed in with those were a lot of letters that were not form letters. And there were people that asked about different subjects, not just the policing and race, but on other subjects for the city. So I really think we do need to go, I don't want people to think their letters just went in some black hole. So I think it would be great. And I think we should, to make it more transparent, put it on the city website, put the questions and answers on the city website so everyone in Albany can see them.
Thank you. I agree. Before I go to you, Commissioner Gary, since you made the motion, Bart, can I ask you if you see Commissioner Marks's question as in the spirit of the motion as you made it?
Absolutely.
Okay. That was my understanding, but is that acceptable to you, Commissioner Marks, or do you need more clarification? Okay.
No.
As long as we all know what's on the table when we come to a vote. Commissioner Gary, thank you for your patience.
No, I was just going to echo what Commissioner Marks said, that we just need to make sure that we're addressing all the questions, and definitely not in a form letter or template response that just goes out. I think we need to be genuine with this. If they're taking the time to ask the questions, they want the answers, it needs to come from a space where we've done the research and we've responded in a manner that, will help them understand more about the community and the police as well. So that's all I have to say.
Right. Commissioner Kerr.
I just want to take a quick minute to respond to Commissioner Grossman, Bart's comment that you can't separate racism within the police force from racism in general. Absolutely. I didn't mean to imply that you could. My fear and my deepest concern is that we're going to address the wrong problem. And I think systemic racism in Albany and everywhere goes much beyond the police department. It goes into every aspect of our social existence. And for us to focus and answer only questions about the police budget is a grave error.
I'd agree.
We had a lot more to talk about than just that.
Can I suggest that we, use that as a framework after we resolve this to the question of what are the big picture areas that the action plan address? Is that okay? Since we have on the table a motion that is about getting responses to questions. So, and then from this, I imagine that we'll move into thinking about our discussion of how to move forward on what's going to go into the equity action plan, or the kind of discussions that have come out and that back and forth would speak directly to. Is there any more discussion on the motion on creating a subcommittee of 2 people to address the questions that have been submitted via email and in the community dialogue session itself? Of getting answers, working with staff and the consultant to get answers, and of getting those brought back to the, getting those, disseminated to the public, presumably through the public website, through the use of the city website. Did I see you, Commissioner Marks? No. Okay. All right. So are we ready to have a vote? All right. I'll call on you individually. Commissioner Grossman?
Yes.
Commissioner Gary?
Yes.
Commissioner Marks?
Yes.
Commissioner Kerr?
Yes.
And myself vote yes. So we have created this subcommittee. I suggest that we staff it now if we can. As we all know, that if we go beyond 2 members, then it becomes a public body that needs to agendize its meetings, which would, I think, dramatically slow down the responsive nature. But I think, we can, so one thing we can see is, people who want to volunteer for it, and then we can come up with a mode to select those the 2 people if we have more. Commissioner Marks?
I volunteer.
Yeah,
I
Commissioner
would
Marks?
like to
is
respond
volunteer.
to.
Commissioner Grossman?
It's not the most fun thing to do, but I said we should do it, so I can't very well not do it.
Commissioner Kerr?
I'd like to second the volunteer efforts of Commissioners Grossman and Marks.
Okay. I think that's a great committee. I guess subcommittee. I'm sure there are others of us who would be glad to do it, but I think there's no point in fixing what's already looks great. So I think it's amenable to me. If it is to, it sounds like it is to Commissioner Kerr and to Commissioner Gary, that the 2 initial staff in of this be Commissioner Marks and Grossman. As we make additional subcommittees, people may need at times to move around, and we can always restaff. But for now, we appreciate that, and we'll hope that we'll have a first stage report on that at our August 20th meeting. So thank you so much. I suggest the next thing that we do is to try and build upon some of the discussion that's happened already about how to think about breaking down the work of an equity impact plan, recognizing that we're not going to resolve certainly not every question of definition or of structure at this point, but at least of laying on the table some areas that we know we want to address, and of trying to attach those to subcommittees that can begin, go about this work in ways that, speak to what, what Nicole and Dr. Shelley presented, and that speak to the range of concerns we have. A few things that I've heard, and I certainly don't mean to be stacking the deck, whatever the commission's will is what will happen. But some things that I'm heard, just to lay some things out on the table, include, in terms of thinking, if a 10-year time frame is the framework that we want, a vision in addressing racial equity that would include a vision of policing, that would include a vision of business development, that would include a vision of interaction between the city and the city government and the schools on schooling, even though the heart of that responsibility lies with the school district, but of thinking about the city's role in that, in thinking about, city services and making sure that those, are designed in a way that emphasizes their equitability, the equitable delivery of those services and access. And there's a number of other things that I've heard as well. So I don't mean at all to be saying anything to knock anything out. Everything, whatever the commission wants to put in, it puts in. So I wonder what your thoughts are if we could start to come up with something in the range of of a graspable but ambitious number of items that we pretty much know are going to want to have a real focus or a subsection in our equity action plan. Commissioner Grossman.
One of the areas which I think is really important is listed here is the history of racism in Albany. I know that, at least I've heard rumors that Councilmember Nason and a group of people worked on the history and have produced something. I don't know what that is or where it is, but I think, that would be a good thing for us to get a hold of, for us to talk to Councilmember Nason and see what information she's got and build on that rather than start from scratch.
Okay.
I agree with Commissioner Grossman. Maybe we can put some type of documentary together and have, the community speak about it. I don't know, just to kind of, paint the picture, where we're able to show where we were and where we're going and what our future looks like. I think that's an option we can look at as well.
Mm-hmm. Other things that we kind of know we want to put in there and to be using to focus this stage of our work, knowing there'll be more stages ahead. Commissioner Kerr.
One of the metrics that I think is very important and relates to the history of racism in Albany is affordable housing. Mm-hmm. One of the most egregious points of our racist history is our redlining and how we have excluded communities of color and people with less money from being able to afford to live in the city of Albany and access the services that are here. So we have within our housing work plan from the planning department some very ambitious goals for affordable housing, and I'd like the Social and Economic Justice Commission and the City Council to put some weight behind those goals and really measure them closely over the next 10 years. Are we any closer to providing affordable housing, and are we incentivizing affordable housing as a reflection of our commitment to anti-racism?
So that sounds like another thing I agree. And we can either make a new commission and subcommittee, or we could ask the subcommittee that exists on housing to, use part of their time to focus on developing this aspect for the equity action plan. I can imagine the logic of either move. Other things that we think we want to have, that we know we want to have in the equity action plan and that we want to prioritize is in this early stage of developing it. Commissioner Grossman.
I don't mean to monopolize, but one of the things that, in terms of what people have said to us so far, I think in addition to the focus on police, the other issue that's come up rather repeatedly is the schools and the racial tension in the schools. And I know that it's been sort of the tradition in Albany to say that school issues belong to the schools and not to the city council, and the city council doesn't talk about schools. But people in the schools are residents of this community. Youth is an important part of this community, and I think we really need to have a section on youth in this report, and that section has to deal with what's going on in the schools. And the schools need to be a part of thinking about Albany 2030. How are things going to change in that school system? So I would really urge that we deal with the concerns of youth as part of this report.
Great. So I've heard, along with policing, affordable housing, and schools as things been reemphasized in this section. Commissioner Gary.
Also, another one is small businesses, or any businesses. I spoke with a small business owner, and one of his questions to me in a one-on-one was, why don't we have any Black businesses in here? He's asked that to, the city council members, and haven't, received much response, and why we don't, maybe, like I said, some type of incentives or something to, invite them in to our city. I mean, we have to make this more of a welcoming city for businesses to come and want to do business. And once we do that, I think that will be a part of revitalizing our small business outside of COVID and making more, revenue for the city. So I think that should be a part as well, the small business.
So small, just to make sure we're, since we don't have, way of doing group notes, but just to sort of, and catch me if I leave anything off, it's inadvertent, but policing, affordable housing, schooling and youth, small businesses is 4 areas that I've heard in here. I think I saw Commissioner Kerr. Were you?
Just a real quick, in support of Bart's comments about the youth in Albany. All too often we think of Albany Unified School District as the only school within the city of Albany. There is an equal number of young people who attend St. Mary's high school. And I think it's a mistake if we don't also think about the impact of our policies on those students in that private school. So I just want to remind everybody that there's a lot of youth there too.
Mm-hmm. So one possibility, if I don't want to jump in over anybody, but, so with those 4 items, and then I think I'm going to take Bart, I took your point on history as in part informational. Can we convey and add to the record the work on history, and then decide if we need at this point a separate subcommittee on that, or see if that's something we want to address later, but obviously that could not be your intention or the will of the commission. And so, we can revisit that. But one thing that I hear in those 4 areas is the possibility of coming out of tonight with 4 subcommittees on affordable housing, which, as I said, could be our existing subcommittee on affordable housing, if that's amenable, on policing, on schools, and on small business. With the 5 of us, that would be 8 slots. So that would be, we also created a 5th subcommittee, an additional subcommittee a minute ago on the question and answer. So in terms of thinking practically, until we get to later agenda item and any future action by council on expansion, that also seems to me like a reasonable, not the only reasonable, but a reasonable number of things that we can set in motion and really feel like we can keep in motion. That said, I'm just, trying to summarize what I've heard here. And if there's, you want a 5th, or you want to, argue that we should get down to 3, or, something else, it's the commission's will. So what are your thoughts on a way forward that allows us to leave this meeting with people charged to do work that they can do in subcommittees in between meetings, so that we come back August 20th, we have a sense of progress?
Could you repeat those, Chair Downs?
So the
4 areas.
Yeah. So, and again, I'm trying to pull out of it, and could easily, we can change them all. It's not that I'm open; it's the commission's will. So the 4 that I can, clearly recall hearing include policing, small business, schooling and youth, and affordable housing.
I wonder if Commissioner Gary, sorry, I raised my hand. I wonder if Commissioner Gary would be amenable to including business questions within the housing economic subcommittee. I think that Bart and I serve on the housing subcommittee, and I would be willing to take on the aspect of businesses and whether or not we're addressing the needs of the business community in that subcommittee for the purposes of this action plan going forward. And that would combine our work and maybe be a little more efficient in the short time frame we have.
I see you, Bart. Let me give, since it was addressed to Commissioner Gary, let me give her a chance to see if she would like to be heard first, or if she wants to take a minute.
No, I would agree. I would be willing to tackle that. And then, I mean, because it'll just be Bart, I'm sorry, Commissioner Grossman, and Commissioner Kerr, you guys are doing the housing, but I'd be willing to jump in and take that particular portion and provide data that you can utilize. I'd be willing to do that.
Commissioner Grossman.
Well, I was just going to say that I think Commissioner Gary has special expertise here in relation to small business, and I would not want to lose that. So, you know, and it may be, by the way, we have an item later on the agenda, we were talking about adding some people. If we do that, we can have a 3-person subcommittee. And that may be a way of handling it. But I certainly, at a minimum, I would want to be able to access Commissioner Gary's knowledge of business in Albany.
Alternately, if we can't get away from the three's a crowd issue of subcommittees, I would be willing to step down from the subcommittee and let Commissioner Gary stand in to add that to the work of the Housing and Business Equity Subcommittee.
And we leave that to be seen.
We could.
Yeah.
So we have kind of two related, platforms on, under discussion. One of which would have 3 and one of which would have 4. I think for the, and just to, keep it fresh in all of our minds. And again, if I say it wrong, correct me. The one that would have 4 would be policing, schooling and youth, small business development, and affordable housing. The one that I have with 3 would have business development and affordable housing together, schooling and youth, and policing. I think we will revisit, the question of size, but I think given then that it's a while until the next regular council meeting, we'll have to proceed at least for the month of August, with 2-person subcommittees. So we do want to be thoughtful about that. If that gets revisited, we can always regroup, and we get up to 7 people as we had previously asked. Then we can always regroup and either expand subcommittees or make more. So those are the 2 things that I hear under discussion: a 4 plan and a 3 plan. Commissioner Marks.
I just want to clarify, for example, when you say you're bringing up affordable housing in the context of this racial inequity in Albany. So what do you want the subcommittee to look at in terms of housing is what I'm like, what do you want from, or even in terms of small business? I think we'd like to attract more African Americans to have a business in Albany. I mean, is that what you're looking? I'm not sure what you're looking for each of the. I know we have these needs, and I agree with you; those are needs. I'm just not sure what you're expecting each subcommittee to do about the needs.
To fix them between now and August 20th. No, I'm just,
that's great. Yeah. Okay.
No, I think in this context, we're talking about the Equity Action Plan, and what those subcommittees would do would be to bring forward, work with the consultants, work with staff, hear from any members of the public who, they wanted to, but to, who, contacted them individually in order to bring back toward the commission, updates, and then eventually a framework for how an equity action plan could address that, both in terms of, specific actionable items by council. It could include assessments and measurables down the road, things that would go in a plan that say, here's where we'd like to be in 10 years, but even more importantly than that, here are some of the steps that, we believe after this consultation can help us get there. Council does X, we, make an intention to measure A and B in 2022 and 2024. I don't mean to, over-determine it.
Yeah.
But that it would be framed in the context of this plan. So it would have some overlap, with, it's especially confusing, I recognize, given that we already have a housing subcommittee. And it would have some overlap, but it would be, with that focus of what could we be presenting as a piece of this plan, as a way of thinking about projecting forward of how to develop longer term, both strategies for solving and for measuring our progress towards solving them.
Thank you.
Does that, but this is up for us to figure out, but that's
Right.
That's my vision of how the subcommittees could keep us moving forward. Commissioner Grossman.
It seems to me that there's an issue of staging here too. If we're going to do a survey and we're going to be collecting more information, we really can't move too quickly into making plans and leave everybody out. What we can focus on now, though, is the formative edge. That is, where are we and how did we get here? And what plans do we already have? And how are they working? So the past and the current situation, so that we have the basis then to look at what people tell us about what the needs are.
I think that's right. That we don't want to, my own opinion is we don't want to wait until after the survey to get started, but certainly, we want to get the process going, but to be, responsive to the pieces that come in through the survey or through other places as it comes along. Other thoughts? Okay.
Do you need a motion?
Well, if we want to do it, I guess one of the questions would be, yes, you're allowed to make any motion you want. So we have two frameworks under discussion, but you can move whatever you want.
So moved, Greg, whatever you said.
No, whatever. It's the commissioner's motion. It's not my motion. We have two frameworks under, one is for a 4 plan, one would be for a 3 subcommittee plan. And it sounds like we've discussed it. So anyone, you or any commissioner could move whichever one you want us to take up first. Are we ready for a motion? Commissioner Kerr.
I'll take a stab at it. I'd like to move that the Social and Economic Justice Commission establish 3 working subcommittees to inform the work plan. Is it the work plan, or what are we calling the?
It is. I can pull it up, but it's not the work plan per se, but it is the
Equity Action Plan.
Equity Action Plan.
The 3 subcommittees.
The 3 plan is what it says on 6.2.
The 3 subcommittees will inform the Equity Action Plan in collaboration with the consultants, and this work will be done and presented to the consultants and council by September 1.
And do we have a second? I think that's so Commissioner Gary?
I'll second.
Okay. Just for clarification, those 3 I assume are the 3, or I'll just ask, are they the 3 that had come up in my understanding of your framework before, Commissioner Kerr? 1 for housing and economic together, 1 for policing, 1 for schooling and youth. Are those the 3 that you envision in your motion?
They are.
Okay. And Commissioner Gary, does that clarification change your second?
No, it doesn't.
Okay. So we have in front of us then a plan to address, to begin our work on the Equity Action Plan by creating those 3 subcommittees: economic development and housing and affordable housing as 1, schooling and youth as 2, and policing as a 3rd. Further discussion? Doesn't sound like
I do. I have a question.
Okay.
So who's going to do the schooling and youth?
I think if we would have to create them, and then we can, then we can staff them, is my opinion.
Because I know we had
the
talked
order.
about Commissioner Kerr and Commissioner Grossman on the economic. So I didn't know if we were going to outline that now, but that's okay. We don't have to.
I think it makes sense to create the ones we want and then to staff them. And we can
All right,
always
so-
come back and revisit.
So
Other discussion, questions?
Second.
Commissioner Grossman.
Do we have a second?
I think Commissioner Gary already did.
Yes.
You did,
That
okay.
would be
And
our second.
I'll call the question.
Okay. So on Commissioner Kerr's motion to create, and stop me, Commissioner Kerr, or Commissioner Gary is the second if you think I'm misstating it, to create 3 subcommittees that would begin work on the Equity Action Plan with the goal of reporting back on the status of their work by September 1. We would have one that would be on economic development and affordable housing, one that would be on schooling, and one that would be on policing, and that we would create on that motion. Is that thumbs up, Commissioner Kerr? Did I state it correctly? Okay. So we'll now take the votes. Commissioner Grossman,
Yes.
Commissioner Gary,
Yes.
Commissioner Marks,
Yes.
Commissioner Kerr,
Yes.
and I vote yes. So thank you. So we now have these 3 subcommittees. The way of staffing them, I think, one, sort of first question would be whether we want to ask our holdover housing subcommittee to just become this subcommittee, or whether we want to create a different, because this one does involve economic development, as our original affordable housing sort of certainly touched on, but didn't in its conception. And to seek volunteers for the 6th spot for these subcommittees, knowing that they'll quite likely to be another subcommittee made by the next agenda item. So one thing that we could do is sort of go around and talk about each of our first couple of choices and see how it weighs out, and then see if we get consensus that way, rather than do a system of nominations, which could get confusing with 6 different spots. Does that make sense to people?
Yeah.
All right. So of those 3, maybe ask you, ideally 2 in terms of staffing, but 1 or 2 that you would most be interested in serving on. Let me go reverse order. The Commissioner Kerr.
Given that I'm already a member of the Housing Subcommittee, I am willing to continue work and add to that workload the development of commercial opportunities, possibly within the housing storefronts, who knows. But I'm also very interested in policing, so I could serve on either of those.
Great.
Or both, potentially.
Yeah. Thank you. Commissioner Marks.
I would be interested in the youth or the small business, and I don't have to be on anything. So I'm whatever. I could be on 3. I could be on 1. I could be on none. I'm happy anyway.
Admire your happiness and your flexibility.
Yes.
Commissioner Gary.
Definitely a small business and schooling and youth.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner Grossman.
It was just occurring to me that maybe the most efficient thing to do would, if the housing and the business are combined, would be for me to withdraw and let Commissioner Kerr and Gary take that one, if that's what they want to do. That might be might be more efficient. Or if I'm quite willing to stay on it as well. But and then if we're going to have 2, that might be a better combination, because that represents the 2 areas. If we do 3, I would stay on that one. I'm very interested in the youth. I've been talking for years about the fact that we never really address youth in Albany. So that's a high priority for me.
So my own interests, I'm glad to serve on anything. I'll try and emulate Commissioner Marks, and this is in all things. But my own, particular interest would be policing and schooling. Looking at the range, I see on here, one potential way of moving would be that, Commissioner Grossman and Marks each had schooling and youth at the top. If that works, then I can, if I understood right, if that works, I can, withdraw, my mention of that. Commissioner Kerr and I each had policing. I think we were the 2 of the 5 that each mentioned that. So we could form that. And then the economic and housing would be Commissioner Kerr and Gary, if Commissioner Kerr is willing to do double duty. But I'm not trying to impose anything on anybody. I'm just trying to listen to what I heard as the different interests, and I am willing to move around to fit other people's interests. Any thoughts, Commissioner Gary and then Commissioner Grossman?
I think you said it right. I think that would work. I have no objections with working with Commissioner Kerr on making sure we get the information needed to
Great.
build upon that subcommittee. So I would be okay with that.
Thank you. Commissioner Grossman?
I just want to express the importance of getting somebody representing youth on this commission so that we can have a 3-person subcommittee that is not made up of just the oldest people in town.
Excuse me, Barb.
Now we're going to have fight.
Well, Commissioner Grossman, I said I would be on it.
You did, that's right.
Through the work with the youth, so I'm still open to that as well.
Okay.
Okay.
Me too. But I hope I aspire to your level of youthfulness, not just in the future, but now for both of you. So I think we've got a resolution to this. So policing is Commissioner Kerr and myself. This is again in the context of the equity action. We have a separate agenda item coming up on the working group. But policing, which is, about immediate action, but on the equity action plan form, part of policing, it'll be Commissioner Kerr and myself. On schooling, it'll be Commissioner Marks and Commissioner Grossman, running the youth brigade on schooling and youth. And on economic development and affordable housing, it'll be Commissioner Gary and Commissioner Kerr. Do we need a formal vote on subcommittee membership, Sid or Isabel? Or is consensus possible?
You don't need a formal vote, but if you want it to be visible in the action minutes,
okay,
then you may want to put that
okay.
vote.
So why don't we do that? Let me first, before we move forward, ask Ms. Anderson, I'll use the chair's prerogative just to ask you, do you feel like that if we've got these subcommittees that you can that'll give you points of contact to work forward with, and knowing that they'll change and expand and over time, points of contact to work with so that we can be moving forward before between now and our next meeting.
Yes, I think these are very helpful, and I think the only point of clarity, which I can refer to the minutes afterwards, just to make sure, is the timeline. I think there was a September 1st that was mentioned, so I just want to make sure that that's clear, so that when we do reach out individually to each of you for these subcommittees, we can have a really succinct plan, because that's a quick time frame, but I think there's a lot we can get done actually in that amount of time as well. So I just wanted to clarify is really the main issue, and then I can get the official names and contact information to follow up.
So my impression, but I'll ask Commissioner Kerr to clarify if she wants.
Actually, I probably should make that date the date of our September meeting, and I'm uncertain as to the specificity of that. Sid, do you have that handy?
It is the SCGC meeting date, September 1st.
Whoa, give me a lottery ticket.
So, and am I right, Commissioner Kerr, that you envision that in your motion as a status report, not the sort of final signature on the document?
Precisely, yes.
Does that?
I'd also like to reflect, can I just have the floor for a minute? I'd also like to reflect in a good way that all of these actions really just reflect our SEJC work plan and our existing SEJC work plan going back several years. And in that regard, they also reflect the work going forward. So the 2021 SEJC, whoever is on that, should be able to easily move into this with a review of their work plan and to continue the work. Because I'm concerned that we're going to sort of feel like we have this disruption in our actions, but I really see this as pretty seamless if we stay true to that. So I just wanted to comment on that.
Thank you. I agree. It'll be an important thing for us to keep our mind focused on especially as we move into the fall, as all of our terms expire December 31st. And we'll want to be turning over, moving things to council, but also turning over things that the next SEJC can also act upon. So let's, yeah, how about if we take a vote to make sure this is reflected in the action minutes? Do we have a motion to ratify those subcommittee memberships? Again, it's myself and Kerr on policing, it's Kerr and Gary on affordable housing and business development, and it's Marks and Grossman on youth and schooling. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Commissioner Grossman, Commissioner Gary, second. All right, any more discussion? Okay, then we can vote. Commissioner Kerr?
Yes.
Commissioner Marks?
Yes.
Commissioner Gary?
Yes.
Commissioner Grossman?
Yes.
Commissioner Downs, that's me. I'll say yes. So that's done. At this point, obviously, there's many aspects to the, to the Equity Action Plan, but we can revisit those on our August 20th meeting as well. So my inclination at this point would be to move to our next agenda item 6-3, which is the survey. But if anyone feels that there's a part of this meeting's discussion on the plan that we didn't get to, I want to make sure that that they are heard. All right, not seeing any. So 6-3 is a related, and we've already referenced this, which is the Racial Equity Impact Plan Survey. As Commissioner Grossman suggested, this is intimately tied up with the plan. But it's I'm to blame if anybody would have preferred it as the same agenda item. I asked to split it up just because I thought that there were quite a number of things that are survey specific that we would want to be able to flesh out, and that we may also elect, on your choice, to have a special survey subcommittee of people who will be able to work with Ms. Anderson and Dr. Holt, to help design and implement the survey. So again, that the work of moving forward with this can happen more, with discernment and deliberation, but with more speed than is possible if it all takes place in these meetings. So that was, I believe, I'm to blame for separating them, but that was the reason. We're joined by Commissioner Marks's cat. We have, I think Ms. Anderson is going to speak to us a bit about survey. We'll take questions, initial comments from commissioners. We'll then have time for public comment on this, and then we'll return for further discussion and any action by the commission. Is that good? Are you ready, Nicole?
Yes, sir. I'm ready.
Thank you for your patience. All right.
No, I'm excited about the last agenda item, and I think that discussion was very much needed to really help guide the work for us as a consulting team, but also for SEJC. So I'm very excited about the work and think that your subcommittee work is going to be crucial in informing that plan. I want to honor some of the comments that were made about the plan, and I know that we've only shared a snapshot, so it doesn't do justice to what the details are, but I want to assure the community that the plan is not designed to be a sit-on-the-shelf plan. That is not the work that we do. We're about making systemic change, and you do need a plan for that, and with very clear guidelines. So I think your subcommittee work is going to inform that. There's a lot of data to unpack, and this survey item is actually part of that conversation. And I'm going to have Dr. Shelley jump in a moment to share a little bit about the purpose of the surveys and how that plays into this. But I truly believe that your subcommittee work will tie into having this survey really inform it. So I know there's some timeline issues around, having survey data, obviously having a survey that can be given for ongoing feedback. So that was a comment made earlier. Surveys are not designed for one-time things. They're actually designed to be over and over, give you a lot of qualitative data, and obviously be able to quantify that data so you have some real themes, right, that you can identify. I think that this work is still premature because at the end of the day, we can assume that those focus areas are the key areas. But once we start unpacking the data, we may find that there's some emerging themes that come out of this. And the survey is a critical part of that, to hear the community and actually have an ongoing space. I can see it on your website. I can see it being kind of an ongoing space, but then also there has to be some clear deadlines so you can collect the data and have benchmarks throughout this time frame. So in that survey, as Dr. Shelley gets ready to share a little bit more of the context, I want you to envision that this survey, I don't think we should have a gazillion surveys, like you be surveyed out and then the information is not any good. You want to have good data. And in that survey, I believe that the questions that go into the survey can feed into each of your focus areas, so that one survey can really ask questions that collect information about housing. It's a community survey, but it's focused on racial equity. And so if you can envision that process, I think that's going to be really helpful for the work, so that you don't feel so overwhelmed with trying to do so much. But also remember, and I want to just kind of echo what Commissioner Kerr mentioned about the policing piece. There's another aspect of this, which is a whole nother agenda item that I want to make sure we remind people that in this survey, we probably will look at you having a separate survey for policing. Because you don't want to have a survey where everything is in that survey and then you start to overwhelm people as well. So you don't want surveys that are super long and people can't complete them. They lose the essence of the purpose of the survey. You want to have real succinct things, and you can have questions that may allude to policing because it is part of that racism conversation. But I think you're probably going to find that separate committee, which is a whole nother agenda item, that you may have a separate surveying process that committee may come up with. So I just want to say that, so that you don't feel like you're trying to do everything in one survey process. But I also know that the work you're trying to do is going to be pretty quick. So if you're going to come up with a survey quickly, this is going to require you to be really succinct about the questions you ask, so that you get the right data to drive your work. And so you may see a blend of, again, policing that may show up in that first survey, but you also may have to have a whole separate conversation, as Commissioner Kerr said, about addressing policing, where you have specific questions that may be a whole body of work in itself. And I just want to say that to give due justice to this type of work, and to give that time as well. Your timelines for policing may look very different for other timelines, so you want to make sure that you really have a good sense of collecting data that's going to drive your work. So I'm going to say that, and then I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Shelley just to give a little bit more context about how the survey process could look, and look forward to working with each of your subcommittees to help drive that development of the survey. Dr. Shelley, I think you're muted.
Hello. Okay. Now I'm not muted. All right. So thank you for that intro, Nicole. And what I can say is everybody is spot on right now with this. But I think that there is just a little bit that we need to consider when it comes to how much goes into a survey of this nature. And so if it's okay for me to share my screen for just one moment, I put together kind of just a brief one-pager, if I can now find it. So I want to share my screen, and I'm going to put it over here. Maybe that'll know which screen I'm sharing.
And Dr. Shelley, while you're pulling it up, I do want to add one piece. As consultants, part of our role is for you not to feel like you have to do all this work from scratch. So we have templates, we have samples, questions, we have kind of a starting point for you so you can really make it your own. But I want to make sure that you hear that, we want to have kind of a guide and framework for you so you're not starting from scratch. And so it looks like it's up, Shelley. I just wanted to make sure I made that comment so that you know that we kind of have a plan that can really help move you forward a little bit quicker as well, since you have some quick timelines for this.
Okay. So here are just a few notes just to consider when we're doing a survey of this nature. And first and foremost, like I was saying before, you have to respect time when it comes to these things. I know everybody wants to move fast, but from my perspective and having done this work, it sometimes makes me a little bit nervous when I see people wanting to move faster than the work can take you. And because one false move, this isn't like any other work that this community has ever done. One false move and work is over, and it'll be another 10, 15, maybe 20 years before we can even re-engage in the conversation. One false move and we make the community even less safe for the exact groups that we are trying to create safety and experiences for. So just be mindful that I know we want results yesterday. We want things done yesterday. We want questions answered yesterday. But the truth of the matter is that there are some situations where we're going to find that we don't have answers. We don't have the data. We don't have what we need. And we have to ask ourselves the question, If that data does not exist, and it has not existed, why has our community not felt comfortable enough to just say, I don't have it? And to realize that saying I don't have it or I don't know is a very vulnerable piece for anyone, whether it's an elected official, a staff member, or someone in the community. Saying I don't know has its own ramifications. And I'm going to tell you, having had some conversations with folks, there are some things that as a community we don't know. There are some things that as a staff that are not known. And there is not a comfortability right now in the city and community of Albany to share the I don't know sentiment. And so I have to say that straight out, because as we're trying to survey, that makes this survey even more critical so that we can get the information in a written format so that we can know what we have and what we don't. But we've got to be ready for the I don't know. So if they say, well, you know what, we don't have any police records by demographics, by race. So what are you going to do then? I mean, so they don't have it, doesn't exist. What are you going to do? What's the plan? Because if that happens, and then the community is going to be in an uproar, now we have a whole nother set of issues where we got to bring people back down to a place where we can actually think and plan and create movement forward, when in actuality, we just weren't ready for the I don't know because there was an expectation that we should know. And so in saying that, this is just a few notes. I really appreciate the narrowing down of the that's what I was doing, was adjusting these right here to what you had just mentioned with these areas of focus. And so I'm very glad that you did that, because this list right here was actually about 10 things before you guys started talking, based on everything that we have been hearing. And we needed to hone that in because it was not possible with everything being kind of scattered throughout of various different areas. One thing I do want to point out is, as we do this survey and as we have these committees, something that we don't want to lose is the historical perspective in each of these areas. So what is the history of schooling in the city of Albany and the communities in the surrounding areas? What is the history? Because the history is going to tell you why things look the way they do right now. What's happening right now in the community is not an accident. It wasn't, it is actually what happened as a result of a myriad of other events that have happened. And having some of the conversations with folks over the last couple of weeks, some of those we do have tucked away. We're going, okay, now we get it. Now we're getting it. We're learning a lot more, but that information is not widely known or shared. And so you have pockets of the community that have different parts of the information. It goes back to that elephant and the blind man. Everybody's got a little piece of the story, but everybody's not putting the story all the way together. And so that's one of the benefits, but also I will say it's one of the curses of consulting, because we do get all of this information, and how do we hone it in and have the community ready to hear it? Housing and small businesses is going to be another one. What is the history? What was the history of redlining? Who created it? How was it created? How was it impacted? How was it instituted? And how was it enforced? How was it perceived? The other piece, again, with policing in the community, I can tell you right now that the data, the demographic data around policing in communities that are very similar to Albany, that when you're looking for racial data in a community that is not accustomed to addressing race and class, or even acknowledging or documenting racial incidents, you're going to find some areas where you're not going to have the data that you're looking for. Furthermore, we have to look at, from a historical context, how comfortable or how plausible was it for people to actually come forward and share things in the city of Albany? I'm sure you've heard me share before. I went to Berkeley, coming from Southern California to Northern California, and we were told very specifically by our African-American advisors, you go through Albany, not to Albany. I worked for Home Finders for years. You did not, I mean, I can tell you as a student, people would be looking at Albany and I'd be like, okay, go on to the next one. You might want it, because we knew people couldn't afford it. So there is a historical context to all of these areas that we cannot afford to let go, but can come out within the survey, especially through the qualitative measures. The purpose of this survey has a myriad of different purposes, which is why it has to be crafted just right. And these commissions coming together to help craft that is going to be critical. One is to assess perceptions. Again, I will say the Albany community is not together, even on the idea of addressing social and economic justice. The community is not together. So when we're looking at things to come out, realize that just as many letters that came in support of this, we have just as many, and if not more in some cases, that are opposed to addressing anything with racial equity in the community. So we just have to recognize where the community is around that. And so the first thing we want to do is assess perceptions so we can get a real gauge of what it is that's going on from as many people as possible. The second thing is a full understanding of the problem or problems. Sorry, I keep clicking on it and you guys can't see it. Understanding the problem is critical. I think it was Commissioner Kerr that said, you know, what are we sure we're going to be addressing the right problem? What is the problem? Where is the root cause of all of this? And again, understanding that historical context will help, but also understanding where everybody sits within this based on their experiences and where they are looking at this elephant from. So we need to understand, is the problem sincerely racism in the community? Is the problem a perception of racism? Is the problem actually exacerbated by racism, and it's an actual economic issue that race is exacerbating? Is it something that it could be an economic problem that race and sexual orientation and the changing times have all exacerbated because of people's understanding of that? So really getting a clear understanding of the problem is going to be critical for this work. This is a big one. Data that exists and does not exist to support the continued work. And I'm going to say it over and over again because Ed Kaminanui's research says that 14 to 40 times people have to hear and experience something before they actually posit it as either being truthful or understanding the context of what we're saying. If the data does not exist, how comfortable is the Albany community going to be when they hear that? And how can we preempt those conversations? Because there is data that's there, there's also data that's not. And therefore, if the data is not there and we need that data around race or whatever it is that we need, we've got to be ready to put systems in place to get it, and also to admit to the public that it doesn't exist and why it doesn't exist. And sometimes it's as simple as saying, we didn't think we had a race problem in Albany, so we didn't look at things by race. Done and done. Done and done. At least you're admitting it and saying it. And then there are these areas where we do have some data by race because we put some measures in place. But we've got to be ready for that to see what's there and what's not there. Determining next steps for the short and long term. This is also critical because we've heard the urgency around everyone with this work. So what are some short-term solutions that are respectful of the work? Because short-term solutions that are kind of placating could exacerbate the issues. An example I'll give is if a short-term solution was to paint Black Lives Matter on a street, well, as wonderful as that is, from what I've gathered from the community that and what I've watched, I don't think that would go over well in the Albany community, not because of what the sentiment is saying, but because they're looking for real substantial change. That's what we've heard time and time again. They're not looking for something to hang their hat on and put in a newspaper and say, we've done it. So what are those short and long-term solutions that are going to be respectful of the work that needs to happen moving forward, and respectful of the position that we're all in, but also impactful enough to demonstrate we are really in this. Quite frankly, having even this conversation is an example of that, although I know it doesn't feel that way at times. This is huge, huge, huge. And in the long term, I get, going all the way to 2030, it's like, oh my goodness, how long does it take? But it takes 3 years, according to research. And again, remember, I'm a researcher, I'm the academic, so if it feels a bit academic, it's because this is part of what this work is. But it takes 3 years to implement something and get it kind of moving in the right direction. 5 years to see quality, valid data that is going to show us results. 10 years before you see true systemic change. And that's not just it's actually 7 to 10 years is the actual window. And so we want to know what is it that we want to do long term. And that brings us to the other point of assigning and determining what is needed to assess the progress of change. I don't know if this was Commissioner Gary or Grossman or Kerr that said this, but we want to know how we're going to measure this over time. And once we develop the survey, are there parts of the survey that we're just going to use as a needs assessment to assess where we are right now, what we need to move forward? And there may be parts of the assessment that are also summary data or formative assessment data that we can take over time to say, oh, okay, this is working in this way up until this point. If we have 30% of the community that understands that there is a racial issue. And then maybe in a year or two, we have 50% of the community that recognizes there is a racial and systemic racism issue in Albany. And then maybe in 5 years, we have 70% of the community that has admitted, yes, there is systemic. That is a quantifiable data point that we can look at and say, we are increasing the knowledge and awareness in the community of where, of what needs to happen as we move forward. But we need to have that kind of data, and we have to be aware of what that means. And then the final piece is to assess the readiness for the journey from cultural proficiency through equity to anti-racism. And if that's the direction we're trying to go with anti-racism being the laws and legislation, we have to come all the way back to understanding diversity, which is part of the cultural proficiency continuum. So how ready is the community as a whole to start to really address these issues? And if we don't know where you are now, we can't take you or say, you know what, goodness, we thought you were here, but actually you're here. Or even, you know, worse, we thought you were way back here, but you're actually way back here in your understanding. Because where we start can, again, one false move in this work, and it's going to be a very long time before it will get the credibility to be able to move forward. What we're looking at is a mixed methods study. So we want quantitative and qualitative data. So we want those stories. And so this is where we are going to be seeking the community and the commission to help us get the stories out. Because a lot of the stories people did not tell. It was not safe in Albany to admit that you had been racially profiled. That was not a safe thing at some point, at points in history to do. So we need to go out and find those stories so that we can really get a good assessment of what's happening, particularly in the areas of policing and housing. Not as much in schooling. People tend to be a lot more forthcoming, but and once the parents find out, but we don't know what the kids have not told us. And continuing through that, we want to look at what participation we'll have in this, because the participation from the community, the schools, and the law enforcement is going to look very different. One piece we have not talked about, and it was kind of alluded to, is where are we on this journey, not only in the community, but also within the staff in the city of Albany, because city of Albany staff may or may not come from the community. And so you have mindsets that we need to assess and see where people are, even with this work within the staff, within the current elected officials, and the generational gap. So you'll see here, I focused on the generational piece, and I brought it up here too, because I think it was Commissioner, was it Mark Grossman, who brought up the piece around the youth. There are very different perspectives in the city of Albany from what we've learned so far, depending on generationally. If you're in the baby boomer generation versus the Gen X versus the millennials versus the zennials, I guess, that are coming up, or the Gen Yers, or I don't know, they come up with something new every week. But there is a generational difference in how we experience this. And so as we look at the participation from the various groups, we want to really garner a participation from a wide variety and identify where that is coming from. So if we can say that 70% of the African American population in the city of Albany is stating that they have felt or do feel unsafe in the community or unsafe around police, we need to know that information. So this survey has to be one where we're going to garner some information also within the various demographic groups if we can. And so these are the considerations that I just want us to continue to focus on as we develop the survey. And I want to be very clear, this survey, we have a bank of questions and various ways that we've done surveys. We do not do any canned surveys. That's why you don't see me saying, here's your survey for whatever. We don't do that because we don't believe in that. This is actually tailored exactly for Albany, which is why we do a lot of what we've been doing, which is the listening and processing of information. And this is what we've come up with, is that strategic is necessary. The community, I can't emphasize this enough. I read every one of those questions that came in, and I'm telling you, the community is not yet unified on all of these issues. So we've got to be careful and thoughtful about how we want to move forward so that we get, it doesn't mean we can't get more people on board, but you're in the middle of an election season, you're in the middle of a lot of different stuff that's happening where you're trying to bring people together, and you also have forces that are pulling folks apart. So you've got to be very conscious of that. Data is and is not available. What are you going to do about it? If it's not there, how are you going to say it? And how are you going to couch that? understanding the historical context of all of this and the generational and racial differences in the perceptions. Everybody on that elephant comes from a certain generation, a certain racial group, a certain community. And so they're going to be seeing that elephant differently. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Shelley. We really wanted to spend an extensive amount of time for the survey so that we could kind of get that part done now and then really jump into a roll our sleeves subcommittee work. So hopefully that was helpful to give a little context. Obviously, there's still a lot of work to be done to develop a community survey that's focused on anti-racism, social justice. So definitely want to open it up for ideas, but and questions or comments. But know that this work still has to be done within the subcommittee work and collectively come out with a survey that really speaks to gathering that data from all of your focus areas that you just identified as a group. So,
All right. Thank you. All right, Mo, thanks so much. So we'll next take questions and first general statements from the commissioners, and then we will go to public comment. As I said before, I would not be surprised if we end up creating a special survey subcommittee to allow this to move forward, but that is, of course, up to the will of the commission. So I think I saw Commissioner Marks. You want to start us off, Margie?
Yeah,
Our most
so
youthful commissioner.
yes, right. So what I've heard in the last 2 months is that there's two Albanys. There's one for white people and there's one for Black and brown people. And so when we do this survey, how are we going to make sure? And as I told you tonight, the Black population is decreasing in Albany. You know, how are we going to make sure that we get to these other groups and the 30% Asian? We want to get to them. We want to get to the African American. How will we get the survey out to the entire community? And maybe I'm jumping ahead. We have to talk about the survey first, but I also think that if we could, some people wrote very thoughtful letters. If we could do a focus group, it would, I'm not saying, when I say we, it doesn't have to be the commission or it could be the city council. With the people that wrote those letters, we could probably get more information about what's going on, especially students and young people in the high school or had just graduated. I think that their letters were really helpful. And especially as Bart and I look towards, doing these thing with the school and the youth, I would like to hear more from them. I'd like to hear more from everybody. And one of these things, I wish we could do some education during this time. Like if we could take a topic like reparations, what does it mean? What's the history of it? And do a town hall. Or should we change the name of the streets? What's it take to change the street name in Albany? What's the legal requirement? Just have a discussion about it and education about it. If we could do some education around some of these subjects. What's the history of the Black Lives Matter movement? How many people in Albany know that there's a movement? I see these signs, but I wonder, do they know what's behind it? Can't we do some education and dialogue with people around some of these issues that I think people are genuinely interested in talking about and hearing about? So I'll shut up.
No, thank you so much. Commissioner Grossman.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that these four areas that we've identified really now are just off the top of our heads, and so I don't think we want to commit to them in perpetuity. I'm hoping that the survey will identify other areas that that are important to look at. Just looking at those four areas, there's a lot left out in terms of people's experience. For example, in terms of services that we have available and to what extent are they perceived as open to everyone and useful to everyone. So, I imagine, although nobody wants a canned survey, I imagine there may be some examples that we could look at as a starting point that have been done successfully, because we might as well build on what's worked, and it's always tricky to figure out how to ask these questions in ways that don't steer people to an answer. So it'd be good to see what other people have done.
Right. Other commissioners. Commissioner Kerr.
I have a question and just a comment, I think. Well, two comments. My question is how will we select the population that we're going to survey? Because I think Commissioner Marks was referring to this in her comments. We not only have racial and economic divides, but we also have a digital divide. And we have people in the city who don't have access to even this meeting, which is really a shame. But it's the reality of the world we live in. So I'm hopeful that you will help us find a way to access a broad spectrum of people. And even when we have that broad spectrum of people, we are at risk of creating a tyranny of the majority by surveying people and feeling that, well, there's no problem with racism in Albany, so we don't need to talk about this anymore. Thank you very much, go away. We need to not let that happen. And I think that the way that we ask the questions is one issue, but the recurrence of the survey and coming back and measuring change over time, again, reflecting on what Commissioner Marks was saying, the survey itself is an educational tool. And if we can reflect change over time, we've achieved one of the major goals, I think, of this whole process. So I'm hoping that while you are currently under contract for a quarter of an FTE of a policeman, for 1 year, maybe we can talk about having a subsequent survey and subsequent follow-ups that will extend beyond the current commitment that you have with us. So those are my comments and thoughts.
Great. I hear a couple questions, and we'll pose those once we get a chance to hear from Commissioner Geary. We'll pose those back to Ms. Anderson and Dr. Holt, one of which is about, methods for surveying relatively small populations, related question about how to make sure that we're disaggregating the returns in a way that if, for example, a large majority group reported no problem, that this did not, overwhelm the reports from relatively smaller groups reporting a problem, and that we could see that disaggregated. A related question. So those are the two things, and then the others I thought were comments. Am I doing all right so far? Commissioner Geary, do you have anything?
No, I usually try to wait till after public comment because it is getting late, so I just want to hear some of the issues to give them the opportunity to speak on it, and then I can chime in afterwards.
So why don't we take these questions back? So the only piece I would add to it is my understanding, though it's, I agree, it's hard to pin down, is that in fact that policing would be part of the survey that the council resolution at least is on our agenda. Designates the working group, which we'll go to next, but that it was, but it designates separately SEJC creating a community survey. So at least in that, SEJC remains that's where obviously council has the power to do whatever it wants. But my understanding is council has designated SEJC as the survey commissioner. Obviously, council can, when it meets at its next regular meeting on September 8th, could clarify that in any number of ways. But we also, so my sense is that it may not be one instrument, but it's one shared set of goals. And then those two questions, methods for finding relatively small groups and for making sure that their answers aren't overwhelmed by relatively larger groups in the survey data. Do either Dr. Holt or Ms. Anderson want to respond to that before we go to public comment?
Sure. Just, I think one of the things that we will need from you is that the outreach for any of these efforts, we need your pulse on the community. Those communities that have been invisible voices. I think the youth is kind of an obvious one, and I don't think you have to convince us that we have to grab that voice. But there are some folks who don't have access, like you said, to this meeting and to the normal processes of governments, right? And so I think there's a little bit of a challenge because of COVID-19. So we'll have to be very mindful about who we partner with to make sure that these questions are also questions that can be asked in the form of interviews. And then also there's another form of this work, which is called observations, which you don't call it a survey, but some of the questions can also be observed in some of the behaviors that happen in the community. So that's a little bit more complex, but I will say that we do have to get some help from the commission on who to outreach to, because your community And we don't want to forget any voices. And we want to keep that group always on that same list of people to recurringly go back to and get their perspective, knowing that those communities can change over time too. So part of the information that comes out of this survey is to help us to also know, do we need to pivot and do we need to look at collecting additional information? So it will be kind of a cycle where it would open up some more information that's going to drive the work. So I hope that helped answer those particular questions. I don't know, Dr. Shelley, if I forgot anything you want to add, and hopefully we answered those questions because those are really good ones.
I think that just to be a little bit more specific, when we talk about the various roles of the committees and the subcommittees, when you're choosing the people that are going to sit on those, being very strategic and thoughtful about who those people that you have chosen represent. And what I mean by that is you have pastors, you have business people in the community, you have those informal leaders that you'll have in the community that they might be at a Dunkin' Donuts on a Thursday morning where they just sit and play chess, but that these are the godfathers somewhat of the community. Everybody knows where the folks are that have the greatest opinions, and they may or may not come to commission meetings. So this is again where knowing your Rotary, your chamber, those are obvious ones. But have we tapped into the pastors group, and whether it's pastors, whether it's rabbis, whether it's whoever, community agency folks that are running some of your service organizations, they will know who needs to be, who is and is not receiving a survey. How are we going to get the homeless population to actually complete the survey? Because we need their voices as well. And so that's where, really thinking about who is sitting on your committees, who's sitting on your subcommittees, who you're reaching out to, who you've connected with, and utilizing those tentacles to reach the community. And over time, even starting talking about it now in your general conversations, anybody on this call, hey, a survey is coming out, make sure you're ready to take it once it comes, and it's going to come, and why it's important. So that message has to go to the community partners. And I think that was the only other ones. Yeah. And to be honest, the youth one is actually going to be the easiest to get. Because they're so much on social media. It's actually the seniors and the senior centers that we struggle to get oftentimes. It's the folks that have learned over time not to say anything, to keep their mouth shut and keep moving. Those are the ones that are actually harder to get. So just to give you some perspective on how we get the folks in the community to answer the survey, it really has to do with how vehement the efforts are from the folks in the community.
Thank you. So now we'll take public comment on the survey. I see a hand coming up. Any member of the public who wants to be heard, make sure that you raise your hand. And I think City Clerk Sue is bringing in our first speaker, who is Julie Winkelstein.
How'd you know?
Well, I didn't know. Maybe you changed the name and then it was going to be David, right?
Right, I could have done that. I'm really interested in the survey, so I'm glad we finally got to it. Some of my questions my concerns have been addressed. I think Commissioner Kerr talking about how accessing it. So I hope that it, and also digital divide, I think should be one of your issues that you're looking at in your subcommittees. I hope that it won't just be an online survey. I hope that it'll be a paper survey also, and also focus groups, meetings. I was thinking that if there were any kind of events like Commissioner Marks mentioned, if there was some sort of event that people attended, spaced out 6 feet apart, but if that would be a way. National Night Out, if that's gonna happen this year, using churches, using rabbis, using synagogues, all of that I think is really important. So that's my biggest concern, is that people will not know about the survey, or they won't be reached out to. And it sounds like Dr. Hart, that's your name, right? I've got so many notes. Holt knows how to get to those people, and I'm really excited about that. So that's my biggest concern, is getting the word out and then accessing it, and also taking advantage of the library. The library is lending out, Commissioner Kerr and I talked about this, is lending out hotspots for getting onto the internet, but that still doesn't give you a device. It doesn't give you electricity, but there's maybe ways of working, other ways, working with the senior center, working with people who would be volunteering to go out and help people connect, walking around with a laptop, walking around with an iPad. There's just so many ways that could be done, working with the YMCA if they ever open again. Anyway, I just really hope that there's a real commitment to really actually reaching out to the community. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I see other hands up, and I think City Clerk Sue is bringing in Susan Moffett.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for the opportunity to speak again. I just wanted to understand a little bit more what Dr. Holt's concerns were about asking questions to which we don't have answers. I understand your concern that it's important not to have a situation blow up, but as one of the people who's been most insistent on the need for data and that questions get answered, I assume that the data is not available. So I'm not sure what you think is going to blow up, but I think many of us know we just have to start from where we are. So that's just one point. As far as the survey, I think it's going to be a really big challenge to reach the Asian immigrant and Asian American communities. And as with any survey, it's challenging because of the diversity of languages, of different immigrant experiences, of different generations. There is no Asian American community in Albany. It's many communities, and we don't know each other, and we don't talk to each other. And I think, but it's a large part of the population, and it's a really important thing to address. And I think cultural competency there and figuring out how to reach these many fragmented pieces of the community is going to be important, and ways of approaching those diverse communities need to be thought through carefully. Thanks.
Thanks so much. Appreciate your comment. I think City Clerk Sue is going to be bringing in our next speaker, and you're on, Jeremiah Pinguelo.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Yeah, so a few good ideas with that survey and for advertisements. A lot of agenda items we've talked about tonight is post notices on our recycling and trash cans on Solano Avenue. We've got these spaces on the sides to where you could post, Albany stands united against hate. That's one of our slogans, but it seems like you took all those out of the trash cans. I don't know why. Maybe we could put those back as a start. Everybody sees those. You got one in front of the city hall, and that survey, it's tough to mail everybody a survey because you got to pay 50 cents for the postage, and online is great, but Solano Avenue, our business area does not have free Wi-Fi yet. I would motion to put that, Solano Avenue should have free Wi-Fi. That way everybody has access to the internet on one street in Albany, and it would help our businesses as well. But also, why not ask volunteers? Why not ask people who are interested, young kids, college students, who could put this on their resume for college or something as experience? Have someone volunteer to stand in front of the post office, that table. They could sit at the table in front of the post office for a couple hours with a clipboard and a survey. And I guarantee you, they get 100 people an hour. I know there's COVID-19, you got to keep 6 feet and all that. So maybe that's not the best idea, but this could happen. You put one person somewhere where there's a lot of people, you don't want to spread the virus. I know, gosh, we have to consider this virus too, right? So, but I'm saying the survey could be done. People could take it and talk to the Project Hope lady, and maybe she can include that survey on Fridays at that building. And every homeless person she talks to, that could be included in one of her paperworks that she goes over include the survey. Thank you.
Thank you. I see one more hand up, and I think City Clerk Sue is moving in Corey Dostey. And you're.
Hi, folks. So first of all, major props to Dr. Holt and to Ms. Anderson around the survey talk. Super impressed and really happy about what I'm hearing. And you raised some really, really great stuff. So thank you, because I think that deserves to be said. Thank you. I want to encourage right around the language piece and language outreach. I know the city probably has maybe some interpreting folks on tap, I would hope, but also I feel like this is an area where that youth piece could be really helpful. Like they know the language their parents speak most of the time, not always, which is another thing, right? But that could be a great point of engagement. And also, you know, I encourage us to pay our youth, not just intern volunteer for free. It doesn't have to be a lot. A little bit of money goes a long way for youth a lot of the time. And then the other thing is around the areas of focus and topics on the survey. I want to check that policing includes like the whole prison industrial complex, it includes incarceration, it includes what happens after you've been arrested, right? Experiences with parole, all of that. So not just have you been stopped, have you been harassed by a police officer, but like, did you have a jury of your peers if you went to trial, all of that stuff, right? And that can be getting further, and maybe that's more on the policing survey. But like, I don't want to lose track of that. And then the other things, I think we did like Chair Downs suggested social services at first as one of the areas of focus. And maybe it's not one that we want, but I know that child protective services get called more on Black folks especially, right? So I think that's important, like as an area in the survey to figure out where the areas of most impact, foster care going along with that. And then healthcare and disparate experiences of discrimination, and especially of sterilization, right? I know that looking up the histories of sterilization in Albany, pretty recent. So all of that stuff. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Not seeing any other public hands for public comment. We'll move on. I see Sid, and I can imagine he's going to ask us to note the time and to either.
Yes.
But I don't want to put words in your mouth.
No,
so.
no, absolutely. We're approaching 10 o'clock, so we'll need to extend.
That's right. So
I have a motion to do that.
We have a motion, then we can entertain it to extend the meeting. It's now 9:56. So do we have any motions? I see Commissioner Marks.
I move to extend to 10:30.
10:30. Is there a second? I see Commissioner Gary. Are you indicating a second? Any discussion? Not seeing any. So now I'll do votes. Commissioner Grossman.
Yes.
Commissioner Marks.
Yes.
Commissioner Gary.
Yes.
Commissioner Kerr.
Yes.
And I vote yes. So we've now moved to 10:30. Are we in your good graces, Sid? Yes. All right. Terrific. So now we're moving from the public comment back to commissioner comment and discussion about how to move forward with the survey. Had some very good responses, both from commissioners and questions, as well as the presentations from Ms. Anderson and Dr. Holt that were very useful, and good public comments. You know, as I said, one thing I could imagine, and we do have some expertise on survey design and implementation on this commission. One thing that I could imagine is a subcommittee on the survey that tries to act upon the things that we raise as an entire group, but that can work more efficiently directly with Ms. Anderson and Dr. Holt than we can as a public body. But that's just my suggestion, and that's really more a procedural suggestion. There's a lot of other things to lay on the table. So, what commissioners? What are some of the things that we want to restart our discussion on the survey on any number of topics? Commissioner Grossman.
I'm concerned about the time in terms of the two items that are on the agenda that really need immediate attention. that committee and whether we're going to ask for an increase in numbers. I would like to see those get done with, and maybe, I don't know if there's much more to say about the survey right at this moment. And maybe we could table that further discussion to our next meeting and really focus the next meeting on the survey.
And Commissioner Kerr.
I am with Bart. I would like us to move ahead with the agenda. I just want to respond to Chair Downs' commentary that there's a lot of expertise on the commission. Indeed, there is, but there's a lot of expertise with the consultants as well. And I don't want to create any barriers to moving forward. So while I respect the skill set of everybody, I don't think we need to encumber the process by adding more folks to ask questions. I think the questions have been raised are good enough.
Okay. Other thoughts? Commissioner Gary, or I think I saw Commissioner Gary and then Commissioner Marks.
Yeah, I would agree with Commissioner Grossman and Kerr. I mean, I think if we could table it, maybe have it at the beginning of our agenda, somewhere at the top, because I think we've, addressed everything for the most part that we need to at this point in time. But if we can move forward with the agenda so we can make the motions for the rest, it would work.
Commissioner Marks.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with moving to the next agenda, the survey. But I didn't understand Judy's comment. What Commissioner Kerr said. What did you mean, Judy?
I was responding to Greg's suggestion, Commissioner Downs' suggestion that because there is expertise on the commission with the commissioners, that we could supplement the work of the consultants and add of the voice of an expert from the commission. And I was just saying, I don't think we need to do that.
Okay, I think we do need to have someone from the commission work with them on the, so is what you're saying is that no one from the commission should work with them on the survey?
No, absolutely not. I think all the subcommittees that we've created are going to create input to the survey. What I understood Commissioner Chair Downs to say was that with regards to the format of the survey and the creating of the, he was suggesting that we have an individual identified to work with the specifics of the survey itself, not the content of the survey.
Okay, I would agree with Commissioner. I would like to have someone from the commission work with them on the survey.
Other commissioners, Commissioner Grossman.
I'm under the impression that everybody on the commission is going to work with them on the survey. And if issues come up that require some special expertise, we'll deal with that when the time comes. But right now, I think we're all part of this process.
Just to make sure I understand the mechanism, because my only, I'm fine with, certainly I'm, fine with not creating more subcommittees or liaisons. Eventually we'll have more subcommittees than people. But I just want to understand the process between now and August 20th, because the one thing I don't want to do is leave without being able to keep things in motion. I guess the questions that I would have, it sounds like I may be the only person or maybe just me and Commissioner Marks, which is fine. The will of the commission is what's important. But the questions that I would have is, as Ms. Anderson and Dr. Holt are developing the survey between now and August 20th, I understand on the question of content that they might engage with the subcommittees on content, but on form, it's not clear how or whom they would reach out to, and they certainly could not reach out to all five of us without creating an improper meeting. But I may be just misunderstanding.
Can I respond? Because I know you all want to get to your next agenda items. So you have kind of two time frames that you're looking at as a commission. So you have August 20th and then you have September 1st. And so I think that between now and August 20th, Dr. Shelley and I will reach out to you as subcommittee members to address your focus area. And in that discussion, we can embed the conversation about the surveys, which has to happen because we want to infuse the survey with your focus area, if that makes sense. So it'll happen kind of at the same time. And so like Commissioner Grossman mentioned that we'll be working with all of you on the survey. but in your specific subcommittee so that the work can move, because if not, it won't go very fast. And I think you all kind of know that process. So hope that helps a little bit, that we'll be doing kind of dual roles at the same time in terms of working with your subcommittees. Does that
Thank
help?
you. Thank you. I think I saw Commissioner Grossman
No,
in recognition.
That didn't help?
that helped. That was fine.
I think he was saying no, that he no longer needed the floor. I don't mean to put words in his mouth. Okay, so we don't have a motion on the floor, and we have suggestions that we move on to next agenda items. So if that's the will of the group, if anybody wants to make a motion, she or he should or they should speak now. Otherwise, we can move forward. Commissioner Marks.
I move that we table the survey question until the next meeting.
Okay.
Is that the motion you were looking for?
No, I don't know. Do we actually need a motion to go on to the next agenda item? I
No.
think we've had discussion.
Oh, okay.
And
Never
so if we
mind.
don't have a motion to act on and we finish discussion, then
okay.
we go on to the
Never
next.
mind.
Am I in good, am I right? I believe we can go on.
Yes,
if
you
we
can go
finish
on.
discussion.
Mhm.
Thank you, Isabel. Okay, so that completes then our discussion of 6-3 on the survey. And 6-4, Council Directive at July 20th meeting. The commission will select members of the SEJC to join a committee comprised of mayor and vice mayor, city manager, police chief Nicole Anderson Associates LLC, to develop the framework for a working group to review and recommend updates to police department policy and procedures related to use of force, bias-based policing, standards of conduct, and complaint investigations. I'll stop reading that part of the agenda item then, because the next part of it refers back to 6-3, which is about the survey. So our directive, as I understand it, is to select 2 members. And it is, after consulting with staff, my understanding is that we can select them by any reasonable and fair and public process that we want. My suggestion, as I put in the email that Sid distributed, was that we take nominations, that we seek to find out if anyone nominated or self-nominated is willing to do it. If we end up with more than 2 nominees, if we end up with 3, I think we can do just a sort of straightforward vote. If we end up with 4 or 5, then we should probably have a discussion about how to handle voting procedures in those contexts. But as I said, we can devise our own method if we so desire. I was just trying to think of something that would be clear and transparent and provide everyone with a voice. Commissioner Marks.
I would nominate Chair Downs and Member Gary to be on this subcommittee. If I get a second, I will speak on it.
I think we can certainly look for seconds. I think one of the first things, if we go by what I emailed, which we don't have to, we could first ask the people if they're willing to, just so that we don't end up needing a discussion of somebody who then says, I can't. One thing I should have said is that the expectation that was voiced in council, especially to the mayor and vice mayor, was that this working group will be doing a significant amount of work in August. So obviously that could affect anyone's willingness. So I was one of the people mentioned by Commissioner Marks. I am willing to do it and have time in August to do it. Commissioner Geary, do you want to respond to your nomination?
Yes, I am willing to do it as well, but I have time.
So I don't know I think at this point it would make more sense to have, but I'm open to have the floor open for nominations before worrying about seconds, because I don't want to exclude anyone from being nominated. But if someone prefers a different model, I'm amenable to it. So are there other nominations, whether of self or others? I want to make sure since I'm one of the people, I want to make sure I'm bending over backwards to make sure that that there is time for anyone to be nominated. So in that context, then I think we do have a motion from Commissioner Marks. Before we would vote on it, we would seek a second. So Commissioner Marks's motion was to nominate myself and Commissioner Geary. Commissioner Grossman.
Second.
Okay. Discussion, and as far as I'm concerned, discussion can include other nominations. I'm not trying to fast forward a process, but discussion, Commissioner Marks.
I would just say, I think we're extremely fortunate to have Chair Downs, who has spent much of his life studying slavery and Reconstruction. And I understand that policing has its history based on that. So I think it's great that we have this resource on our commission. And then we're lucky to have an African American, given the percentage in Art City. We are fortunate, and one that's very knowledgeable on this subject and has a lot of passion for it. So I think, Member Gary is a good choice. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Marks. Other discussion? Commissioner Kerr.
I just wanted to reflect on the fact that I almost nominated myself, but I decided against it. And I did that based on the fact that, as many of you know, my brother was murdered almost 20 years ago. And as a crime victim, I think I have a lot of value to add to the conversation. So I support the nomination by Member Marks. But I hope that my experience and the experience of other individuals in our community who are crime victims is not forgotten in this process.
Absolutely. Thank you. Commissioner Grossman.
I'd like to move that we unanimously approve the two candidates.
I have a procedural question before I ask for a second on that. Because we were figuring out the process, I wasn't sure where public comment would come in. I think we do need to take public comment on an agenda item before acting, if I'm right. Is that right? So Bart, would you be amenable to
Sure, whatever
public
works.
comment?
Yeah, whatever works. I don't know that we do. Isabel, do we normally take public comment on a decision like this?
Yes, you take public comment on every item.
Yep.
Okay. So with your acquiescence, Bart, then I'll ask for public comment. I see one member of the public waiting to come in. And City Clerk Sue is moving in Jeremiah Penguelo.
Hey, it's Jeremiah here.
Hi there.
Yes.
You're on.
Yeah, these member bodies, I wish you guys would ask a member of the public to be in one of these subcommittees. I don't know, you guys up there on these committees and these chairs, you guys got so much work to do. You want to table half these agenda items, It's like, let the public help, let the people help, you guys. Open up a subcommittee, let citizens volunteer. I know you guys have your experiences. You guys have so much work on your plates. Let people who want to do it. Let people want to get involved. People are out here looking for a way to get involved, a way to validate their life. People want to show interest and do something, So open these subcommittees, have a member from the community be on one of these committees, because if you really want someone's opinion that matters, pull someone right from the community, from each, background, not just someone that's on a committee already, have them be on another committee. I mean, how many committees you got to be on? I mean, if that's, all about your place in society, oh, I'm on these committees, I'm on this subcommittee, and you could put that on your business card. Come on now, give it a rest. Let someone else get involved. Let someone else have an opportunity to be successful. Let someone else have an opportunity to show some leadership. Thank you.
Thanks so much for your comment. I appreciate and endorse the idea of public involvement. The only things I would note is my understanding is if we expand subcommittees beyond two, because of our size, they become officially acting bodies in general. In terms of this, I think we are also constrained by the council's resolution that we appoint 2 SEJC members. So council could have chosen otherwise, of course. But I appreciate and embrace the spirit of the remarks. Commissioner Grossman. I think you're muted, Bart.
We don't have an option on this one. This is what council asked us to do. And I would like to now make a motion that we approve these two people unanimously.
Is there a second?
A second.
Second. Is there discussion? Okay, seeing none, I assume we still vote individually on the motion to unanimously approve. Is that right? Yes, okay. Commissioner Kerr?
Yes.
Commissioner Grossman?
Yes.
Commissioner Marks?
Yes.
Commissioner Gary?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Thank you. So the 2 members selected are Commissioner Gary and myself. Next item on the agenda is item 6-5. This is about demographic categories, the city's advisory body application. So we had, as you recall, back in 2019, it seems like a long time ago, Commissioner Kerr and myself, as the then composed Diversity Inclusion Subcommittee, had written a resolution that our commission approved to ask council to report EEO data on existing staff, as well as to gather data on commissions. Council approved the first, but not the second. We repassed the commission, the motion on commissioner data in the, getting data of applicants or members of commissions at our last meeting so that it could be taken up in time for the new applications that'll start coming in at the end of this year to take effect in January of 2021. Council sent that back to us. There are 2 things that came out of the meeting as I saw it that, give us reason for reflection. So rather than have an immediate follow-up resolution, just have this as an agenda item for our reflection. If at the end of it, it seems like we're ready for a resolution for our August 20th meeting, then it can go back to our diversity and inclusivity subcommittee and turn around in time for a resolution then that can take place before council's next regular meeting, which is September 8th. Council does have a special meeting before then, but my reading on August 5th tomorrow, but that's has one agenda item about the election as a continuing item, as I understand it. So we wouldn't miss anything by taking that time. The 2 pieces that I think sit in somewhat, contradictory places coming out of it. One was a statement by legal counsel their opinion that it should follow the EEO format, which requires both the sort of predetermined categories as well as the mechanism for collecting EEO. At the same time, there was also commentary by council members that they would like not to be constrained by EEO categories, as I think, in my memory, all of the commissioners said at one point or another, were it possible, given the limitations of those categories, especially on gender, where they'd be far out of compliance with what, in my opinion, many people of Albany would like our questions to ask. So we kind of have a couple of paths forward as I see it, though obviously the commission might well see it in different ways. One of which is, to make a case for, asking to revisit the opinion that it should follow the EEO guideline and instead to build upon the statements of council members that they would like a survey devised with the categories that would be more reflective of Albany, especially on issues of gender. And we have received, Janelle and I, Commissioner Gary and I have received some very helpful follow-up on this from some members of the public who have expertise in designing inclusive survey categories. So we could, work, we could devise that and report that as a motion and, ask council to consider operating out of the EEO guidelines. If that were the case, then we could devise a relatively simple process for an opt-in survey that would be held off of the CEO's site. That could be as simple as a hyperlink on the application form, since it's purely voluntary. That just simply goes to another place where there's a survey form that people can fill out, and where the city receives in the end just the aggregate data. That would be one way forward. Another way forward would be to be working within the confines of the opinion of the legal staff that has to follow EEO. And in that case, I think we would have to decide whether to go forward in that context or what we wanted to do. So those are my understandings. I think many of us were on the call, so some of you may have understood council comments in a different way or have a completely different sense of how to go forward. But I thought we could at least kind of lay out our viewpoints in hopes that if we were at a common place, we could report back a commission for a resolution for the August 20th meeting. Commissioner Grossman.
I suggest that we refer this back to the Diversity Committee to come up with categories. And I would further see no reason why we need to be bound by the EEO categories. This has nothing to do with employment. And as long as it's voluntary, I don't think there's any reason why one has to use a set of categories that were developed for a totally different reason.
Other thoughts by the commissioners? Commissioner Kerr.
Thank you. I did a little bit of research and tried to establish in my own mind whether there was a difference between EEO standards and U.S. Census data points. And I believe that there is some variance, and even within the U.S. Census data, there is some acknowledgement that gender is not a simple binary issue. So I'm wanting the inclusivity subcommittee to look at the U.S. Census data that's gathered and consider that as a sort of a standard, which would give us a larger subset. We would know what Albany is represented when we get the 2020 census results. And we could then tie our statistics to that in some sort of meaningful way. But I also, and this was the point that I was trying to get added to the conversation, was language fluency. To me is in our community possibly more important than how you identify your racial background. And I would like to see, again, this is all voluntary. You cannot answer any of these questions on these forms, but I would like to see us consider adding language proficiency to our questionnaire for public office and for commissioners, and just gathering that data, and then through that process, encouraging the participation of people who can communicate with our almost 40% non-English speaking population. Primary language, non-English speaking.
Great. Other commissioners? All right, so I'm hearing about the Diversity Inclusivity Subcommittee coming back with a resolution. Yes, of course. I'm sorry, Commissioner Marks.
Sorry.
No, I'm sorry.
Now I forgot what I was going to say. This is terrible. I hate Zoom. But never mind. It's okay. Go on.
Okay.
Never mind.
Comes back to you. I'm glad to call you anytime. So if it going back to with the hope of devising categories that we could present to council and feel good about as representing something closer to the modes of self-definition in Albany, including looking at census as possible categories and potentially including language proficiency response, within that. So those are the two comments I've heard. I don't know that we have to have a motion to have the diversity, inclusivity subcommittee take up something that council sent back to us, since we'd have to have a motion on any resolution. But if we need one, we can have one. If not, I think Commissioner Gary, do you feel like that our subcommittee has enough information to go forward?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So it sounds to me like we have enough information to go forward. But I think I have not taken public comment on this item. And I think I need to take public comment before we go forward. Is that right? And I see one member of the public with their hand up. So City Clerk Sue, if you could bring in our speaker.
Hi, Corey Dostey. I'm just a little perplexed about the comment, Commissioner Kerr's comment about the census categories. In my looking up the difference between the EEO and the census, EEO had an option where you could put in like the commentary box is non-binary, but the census you just had to pick like male, female. And I waited to get the paper census because online you can't scribble anything in. And on the paper one, I was like, so here's the deal. I'm non-binary. This is what my identity documents say at this level. This is what they say at this level. Please flip a coin, all of that stuff. So I would be interested to hear a little more about that. But yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your comments. And I think City Clerk Sue is bringing in our other member of the public who wants to be heard on this. You're on, Jeremiah Pinguelo.
Thanks. Yeah, this one was kind of difficult for me to understand and follow. I don't know if you could explain it in like 15 seconds. Just kind of seems like city advisory. It's just kind of hard for me to understand this one. So this is my comment, so you can't say anything. I don't know, your demographic categories, I don't know if it's referring to people with different ethnic backgrounds, but if it is, you should obviously get one of someone that speaks every different language. But anyway, all right, thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate your comment. Just for clarity, this was an effort over the last 8 or 9 months, forget, of the commission to implement a system where the city could start to measure its ability to reach out to a wide-ranging and diverse pool of applicants or members of different commissions, so that it could become both the sort of measure of how the city is doing at reaching out to different people, and a way of moving forward. So our subcommittee will take all this under advisement, and if we have a resolution for the August 20th meeting, we'll make sure it's distributed ahead of time. And then we have item 6.6. This is our an update, which I appreciate Sid and Isabel adding, about our prior request. We've received some questions, and we've had some questions from within our own discussion about the ways that we would be improved if we had more membership. Sid and Isabel posted what we had passed in October of 2019, which was a request to add 2 people with a mechanism there. We could well, I've received, since council didn't take that up, we could pass a new resolution, we could write a new one. We've had some suggestions of different ways of, rather than fall into how to appoint an at-large from within the city, of asking for both to be appointed by the school district as a way of not seeming to, create any dilemma of how to select an additional at-large, but to ask the school district we could rewrite it to ask the school district to appoint both people. We could come up with some other mechanism, but my concern was just of giving us the status update so that if we wanted to act at our August 20th meeting, for example, that we would have a sense of where we are and what we would need to show to council. Commissioner Grossman.
I'm not sure what the problem would be with what we've already submitted. The difference is that several members of the council said that if we needed more personnel to do the job that we need to do on this long-term project that we're engaged in, that they would be supportive of that. So the circumstances have changed. The workload has changed. I don't see any reason why we couldn't make the same request again in light of that. I don't understand what the problem is of appointing somebody ad hoc. I mean, not, what's the term for,
I think the
at
term we
large?
used in our previous resolution
large.
is at
Yeah,
large.
I don't see what the problem is for council to appoint at-large members at this point. So I would suggest we simply ask them once again and make them aware of the fact that we need additional voices, and we need help with the workload.
Other thoughts from commissioners? So I think our question would be, do we want a motion now on on the prior motion? Do we want a communication? Do we want to ask for somebody to write a resolution for our next meeting? How do we want to move forward? My sense is there has been consensus on a desire for more people, and there is a new context. Commissioner Marks.
Well, I don't think we have to do it for the next meeting because it was on the agenda for this meeting. I think we can just do a motion at this meeting to move this request forward to the city council again.
Is that your motion, Commissioner Marks?
That's my motion. So I move.
Good. All right. So to move the prior motion from October 2019 as written, is there a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Kerr seconds. Is there discussion? All right. Commissioner Grossman.
Just briefly, that maybe we should probably write a little preamble that explains why this is so pressing right now.
Okay, wait. And does the public have to comment on this also
Yes,
before we
they do.
vote?
So we may need a intervening motion, given that it's 10:29. And our original motion extended the meeting to 10:30.
It says 10:15 on my clock.
Does it? That's how youthful you are, Commissioner
That's
Marks.
right.
And she made,
From my time zone, I'd like to move that we extend the meeting until 10:45.
Okay, 10:45 is the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All right, I'm going to move to the vote. Commissioner Gary,
Yes.
Commissioner Marks,
Yes.
Commissioner Grossman,
yes.
Commissioner Kerr,
Yes.
and myself vote yes. We've extended to 10:45. We have, I think, on the floor a seconded motion to repass the resolution as is, with a request for a statement of a kind of clarifying opening statement pointing towards some of the things I imagine that Commissioner Grossman said in his prior remark about the increased workload of the commission, given the charge that council has put upon it in regard to the equity action plan and the survey. Is that in the ballpark of what you were seeking, Commissioner Grossman?
That and the recognition that that greater diversity, more voices would be helpful.
So greater workload from those council motions, as well as the ongoing, as stated in the original resolution, the ongoing desire of the commission for greater diversity. Do we want to just try and wordsmith this, preamble that we could say? Commissioner Kerr.
I'm not sure that we, going back again to my earlier comment about our workload always having included these issues, I'm not sure the issue is a greater workload, but it's a higher priority.
Okay.
And it's a publicly driven higher priority of the work that we had already been doing. So I don't want us to lose track of the fact that this has always been our charge.
That's well taken.
So Bart, I don't know how to
That's fine.
wiggle your words, but
no, I think that's fine. I'd be happy to work with Chair Downs on putting a few words together. We only have a few minutes now. I don't see us doing it here.
Okay.
What you're saying, Judy, makes good sense to me.
So the motion of Commissioner Marks is seconded, is on the table. We do have, a suggestion of a brief preamble drawing just upon the comments of our discussion that would be added to it and submitted with it by Commissioner Grossman, with my input if he wants it. Should we move to public comment?
And I don't, that was something I just suggested. We haven't voted on that.
No, that's right.
Okay.
We haven't voted on anything at this point.
Okay. Okay.
And we'll come back for discussion and vote after public comment. But is there anything anybody wants to weigh in before we go to public comment? Okay, so we'll go to public comment, then we'll come back to the commission for discussion of Commissioner Marks's motion and potential action. So City Clerk Sue, could I ask you to move in the member of the public? Jeremiah Pinguelo, you're on.
Hi, thank you. So we're on 6.6, correct? This is talking about the increasing the Social Justice Commission to more members?
That's correct.
All right, great. Wow, this is perfect. So increase it as much as possible, you know? I mean, it even increases so much to where you got a social commission, you know, economic, you know, justice commission, you know? It's like everything's so combined. You know, obviously I can't volunteer. I would love to volunteer on this because I feel I'd be able to provide a lot of insight to life. At this point, I'm 36 years old and I'm already so well-rounded. I've been through a lot. So it's just appointing 2 people that are already on a committee again. So this is great. You want to put a student in there, which is great. So yeah, you got to add a student in there. Well, I wish I could volunteer. If you have any opportunities, please let me know. Sid, you guys all got my phone number, my email address, Pinguelo at Yahoo. Just email me, let me know if there's opportunities to get involved. So I'd love to be able to help out. And don't forget, you guys, to add those future agenda items. I know it's coming up next, and you guys wanted to add your items, so don't forget. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, so not seeing more public comment. So we have, we're back to the discussion of the motion made by Commissioner Marks. Further discussion? Okay, I'm not seeing any desire for recognition. So does that mean we should go to a vote? And the vote is to repass. Commissioner Kerr, I'm sorry.
I just wanted someone to read the motion.
Okay. Commissioner Marks, do you want to give the motion or would you want me to do it?
Of course, I want you to do it.
Well, yeah, I don't want to be put. My understanding of the motion as made was to repass or to pass again the portion of the October motion that is included on the October 2019 motion that's included on the agenda, which is item 2 on that agenda. Item 1 is about a different shift in the work plan, but was to increase the Social and Economic Justice Commission membership to include 2 at-large members with emphasis on appointing members that represent the diversity of the city and a student age member. So is that correct in your understanding, Commissioner Marks?
Yes.
And I think Commissioner Grossman, you seconded it. Is that your understanding? You can withdraw your second if you think it is shifted.
Yeah. No, actually, that's fine.
Okay. Commissioner Kerr, back to you. Does that, do you have a comment or? Okay. So shall we vote? Okay. Commissioner Kerr?
Yes.
Commissioner Grossman?
Yes.
Commissioner Marks?
Yes.
Commissioner Gary? Commissioner Gary? Oh, I think maybe frozen. I'm going to vote yes so that we can get a 4th vote on. Commissioner Gary, if you come back in, we can make sure to record you. But it looks like, is her screen appearing frozen to you all? Okay. So if she doesn't come back on before we adjourn, we can write it as 4-0 with 1 abstention. Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah.
So if Commissioner Gary comes back on, but if not, so that takes us to the end of item 6.6. Requests for future agenda items by the commissioners. Any requests for future agenda items by commissioners?
I have a request.
Okay.
I would like to, I don't know how to put, I would like to see us take this time when people are interested for the commission to recommend some kind of education stuff that could be done with the community in Albany.
An agenda item about commission participation and community education event, is that?
Right. I mean, let's do some community building stuff. You know, let's do, you know, I don't know, but people are interested in segregation and in discrimination and in Black Lives Matter now. So we should, you know, educate people about that.
Okay. Thank you. Other agenda items, I don't think we need seconds on this. So other agenda items that commissioners want to add for future meetings. Okay, seeing none. I don't think Commissioner Gary is going to be coming back on. But if so, in that context, then the last items of our agenda. Our next meeting will be a special meeting August 20th. It says City Hall Council Chambers or virtual meeting, but I am virtually certain it will be virtual. You know, the future is, it's hard enough to know the past, much less the future, but I assume it'll be virtual. Do we have a time of 7 or 7:30 for that, or is that still to be determined?
7, the same
7.
as this one.
Same as this one. So 7 o'clock on, so our next meeting will be August 20th, 7 o'clock virtually, and City will post announcements, and hopefully we can all participate in getting the word out on that. With that, we have reached the end of our agenda, and so the SEJC for tonight is adjourned. Thank you, staff, for all your work in August meeting together, and thank you all for working so late, and thank you to the public for sticking through. Thank you.